So this will be a special presentation to council, and as soon as the special presentation is over, we'll take a few minutes to fold the diorama back up, and then we'll have our formal meeting after this. So let me start by thanking the students and the teacher from Willows and welcoming everybody, including all the parents and aunts and uncles, grandparents, friends. So welcome to council chambers. And what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce Tim Murphy, who's the teacher for grade 5 for École Willows School. But we're all grateful it's going to be in English. We do have a couple of French speakers or French understanders here, but this is a project, and I'll ask you to introduce it in a minute, Mr. Murphy. As we can see, it's a traffic corridor project, and I know the students have been working incredibly diligently, hard, thoughtfully. Lots of research has gone into it. There's a diorama which it's going to be described to us later, and what we're going to see is there's a PowerPoint presentation which these 5 students sitting up in front will make a presentation on. So, Mr. Murphy, welcome. Now, you're going to have to, because we're being televised, you have to be near a microphone with a red light. Yeah, you might just have to share a chair for a minute.
Right now? Yeah, just for a minute. You just stand right beside me, and then we'll switch spots.
You'll get it back.
When do you turn on the camera?
It's already on.
So we're live streaming now. And just so you're wondering why the fire and the police department are here, it's got nothing to do with impending emergencies, but they're here for the later meeting. But of course, they're all interested in safety here in Oak Bay, and of course, safety is what this is all about. So, Mr. Murphy, welcome, and
thank you.
Introduce the topic and your students, please.
Well, we're very honored to be here, and we appreciate the council, your worship, for inviting us and allowing us to present quite an exciting activity. In November, both his worship Niels Jensen as well as Councillor Kirby and Power People, Oak Bay Police, our PAC members and parents. Roy Brook has been a driving member of our parent community and community in general to try and create a new space, a new incredible space for Oak Bay, and we were presented with the opportunity to kind of solve some of those problems. So with our new curriculum, I think we've been provided an amazing opportunity to, as a teacher, to present a question or a problem or an opportunity, and it's up to the students to try and solve and answer those questions. So the challenge was, how do we design a new traffic corridor with Bowker and Cadboro Bay as the opportunity, with Abstract Architecture, who was the primary presenter in that first moment. And they gave us a number of tools and information that our kids took and researched and moved forward. What you'll see, we've got 5 presenters here, but it was certainly a whole class who took that opportunity and really created something. I stepped back, encouraged, gave them resources, and allowed them to create what you're going to see. So I'll leave it to the experts.
And then could you introduce the students too, please?
That's their job.
Okay. That's all part of the show and tell. All right. So now, just to remind you, when you're speaking, you have to have the red mic color on, and have the mic close to your voice, close to your mouth, because otherwise the people who are watching at home or in the archives will not be able to hear. Okay.
Hi, we are from École Willows School, and we are excited to present to you our traffic corridor project. I'm Connor, this is Callum, this is Kasra, and Natasha and Kira.
Welcome.
Abstract and Oak Bay Council present. Oak Bay Council, Abstract, Oak Bay Police, Power People, and Willows PAC presented the challenge of the Bowker Cadboro Bay traffic corridor. We were given information about issues, priorities, and the scope of this project. We were informed that there were real resources allocated to creating a new traffic corridor. created and answered questions to create our focus. We want to make streets safer, make the space accessible for all people, and create a beautiful space. We identified issues like the sidewalks are too narrow, speeding cars on the corner, limited visibility sight lines, limited crosswalk locations, drivers not obeying traffic signs, signals, or laws. We worked together and learned about the consensus Fist to 5 model.
Making it real. Students learned about accessibility in a field trip to UVic and One Ability. Another exciting trip was to watch the demolition of the building on Bowker and Cadboro Bay. These experiences helped us understand why it's important to make this corridor accessible for all people. It was also fun to see the project, starting with the demolition of the building. We also created posters for the panels that will surround the construction zone. Creating designs. In small groups, we shared our ideas, priorities, and possible designs. We took minutes for our meeting and coded the information with color to find our class's interests and priorities to be included in our designs.
Students present their designs. We used our previous research, blown up maps with overlays, and the online tool, streetmix.net, to create and present our designs. From these presentations, we created 4 colored zones. 6 groups created our final designs for each section of the corridor. We used Fist to 5 to find consensus on the priorities in each zone, and then created our master design using streetmix.net. Final designs. The final designs were created collaboratively. The 4 zones were chosen by groups, and using the streetmix.net final tool designs, we started creating our 3D models. We created 3D dioramas using color-printed designs, a base construction paper, cardboard, and plasticine.
Making our models. Groups used the research master designs began creating sections of the corridor on firm basis. Careful calculations, measurements, comparing, and connecting. Students placed their sections together to see the puzzle come together. For example, the corridor is 18 meters wide, and create a corridor that was 18 centimeters wide. All creations were scaled proportionately to 1/100th the size of the real-life corridor. We made and laid out the roads, sidewalks, and lanes to connect the other sections of the corridor. What is different? We recommended wider sidewalks to improve accessibility, appropriate parking spaces, improved bike lanes, buffers between bike lanes and the road. Buffers should have trees and flowering bushes, rainbow and themed crosswalks.
Lessons learned. Create safer streets, bike lanes, and sidewalks. Designing more accessible spaces for all. Scaling and proportion. Collaboration and creating consensus. Explored self-directed, independent project learning. We as youth can have an impact on our community. We would now like to invite you over to our diorama.
Okay, thank you very much.
So
I think what we'll do is we'll just sit here and let you walk us through it for that. Now, you're
Okay.
still going to have to be close to a microphone with a little red light on, so. Thank you. No, you're not going to be able to move that around.
All right, so here we've got like what like buffer zones as you may see downtown on like Pandora Street and stuff like that, and there's like buffer zones and like a private bike lane, like one way, and so street parking here, and there's another bike lane on the other side. So yeah. Willows. Willows. The school's like there. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Mhm. Yeah. So. Yeah, because we always the intersections like this. Yeah. So the intersection section with those turn lanes just there. So yeah. Yeah. There's a turn lane on like Dalhousie or Bowker or something like that. Mhm.
So just point out where Dalhousie is here. Correct?
Dalhousie is like here or maybe there. Yeah. Bowker. Yep.
Oh, the condo's there? Oh. Oh.
Yeah, and we were gonna put like our idea with the rainbow and themed crosswalks. We didn't have time to like make the crosswalks rainbow, but we like I forget who said it, but
Like that's
yeah.
what we're gonna like try our best to like make it if we try and like get the corridor like to like get rebuilt.
Yeah, so there's bike lanes and parking and buffers and yeah.
All right. So let's see if there's some questions. I have a bit of a question about. I noticed, and we've seen this before. Councillor Kirby and I had a preview here, and I noticed first of all the protection for the bike lanes on the Willows side, so it would be on this side, is fairly thick. And what would be on there?
So, with the the parking, there's an unprotected bike lane for a reason. Because if we didn't have the parking there, because some people don't have parking,
Residential parking,
the
something
gray
like
part?
that.
Separating the bike lanes.
Buffers.
No,
Buffer
but on
zones,
the
yeah.
buffers is trees and flowering bushes. Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
That was what
trees
I was
and flowering
looking for.
bushes. He got that right.
And do I understand it correct if I've interpreted that? You just have the protected bike lanes on one side, but not the other?
Yes.
Yeah.
And why
Yeah.
is that?
Space issues. That stuff.
Yeah.
So
How like wide the corridor is.
So, one side, a lot of people don't have parking, so we had to make the decision to have parking or not have parking. So we used the buffer on one side and used parking on the other side, so that so bikers can still bike on both sides, but there would be parking on one side of the road.
Yeah, like we planned it and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
our decision in the end was to put protected on one side and not protected on the other because we want to have parking and bike lanes.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I also noticed you talked about narrow sidewalks. Did you consider that in your design?
Yeah.
Widening the
like
sidewalk?
yeah, we want to make it because the sidewalks on part of it are just so skinny and it's just like a post in the middle of it and it's like terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yep.
Not terrible. We still love Oak Bay.
You got that right, Kasha. Yeah, so
Spoken like a future counselor, eh? Very good. So I think there's some other questions, and at some point I'm also going to ask. See, our engineer. Can you hold up your hand? No, over there on our engineer, not the Willows engineer. So that's Mr. Haran. One of his jobs is to work with a team that would redesign our streets and sometimes rebuild the streets when that's necessary. So he may have a few questions because he's the expert we rely on here, and he has a team. But I'll call upon him to see if he has any at some point, any questions. So I know I've seen Councillor Nay's hand up and then Councillor Zelka, and then we'll kind of go around the room to see if there's questions.
Thank you very much, you guys. And what I wanted to, I really like how you've worked really hard to figure out ways to share the road for the pedestrians, the cyclists, and the cars. And I think you made a really good effort here. So I'm kind of curious. How many of you ride your bikes to school right now? Do you all? Sometimes, once in a while, a little bit, right? Do you mostly walk to school, or do you? Are you most of your some of your walk?
I usually like drive and then
Okay, different things. Okay. So I'm just curious then, I'm trying to, if you can imagine the road being designed as you've laid out here, do you think you'd ride your bikes or walk more to school if that was the case? Would you? What would about this plan would make it so that you would ride your bikes or walk more to school?
because we made it. Good one, Connor.
I think I would do it because if we can try and get the cars to go slower, because it's a curb. It's almost like a race car track almost. So they speed, and if personally I wouldn't feel safe biking along that if there's a speeding car. And I also like the idea of the protected bike lanes. And also around the school zone, I've sometimes seen faster cars, like really fast cars. Yep. And I wouldn't feel safe biking around that area.
The corridor, it's like a blind intersection, and yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. A question for our new staff here in the center. A fabulous diorama. Thank you so much for bringing this and making it very real. I wanted to ask for the bike lanes expert in the group. I know we're talking about slowing down traffic. Our engineer has already got a study that wants to slow our traffic down to maybe about 40 kilometers an hour. What about speeding bikes, especially coming down that hill? Do you have any suggestions on how we can slow the bikes down? Because I'm worried about the pedestrians at that corner.
Okay, we were gonna. No, no. Well, because some people can't bike as well, so. But we could little sidewalks, like mini sidewalk. I don't know. I don't exactly know what you mean.
I do worry about the cyclists coming down that hill. Obviously, the cars speed through there with the blind curve coming down this way, and I sometimes worry about cyclists too. It's hard not to speed.
Well, we wanted to make a safer bike lane because there's been a couple accidents in the past. Yeah, a bit. And so we wanted to make a safer bike lane with a buffer zone just here.
Really appreciate that. It looks very fantastic. Yeah. Thank you.
And probably have bike traffic lights like they do downtown. And at Pandora and stuff like that. And there's and there's small speed bumps. So yeah.
So let's see if Councillor Kirby has any questions. Then we'll go to our engineer, Mr. Horan, and after that we'll come over to the other side.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just ask a question. I see that Marcus Luter, who's our school liaison officer, or was the school liaison officer for Oak Bay Police, is here and spent a lot of time in there. You guys probably see him when you're coming and going from school, right? And he would try and catch people speeding, coming and going. And so I think I'm wondering if afterwards maybe we could have some kind of testing to see just how many people are speeding through that zone, and if your design might improve that, the reducing the speeding in that zone, because it looks to me, and maybe you can clarify this, that the road is narrower with your design.
Yeah, so once I saw
The road's narrower, so the cars would drive slower. If they have a bigger space, they would tend to drive faster. So in a smaller space, it would be. We did studies of if the road was smaller, cars would go slower.
If the road was thinner, like yeah.
yeah.
Narrow. Okay, thank you. Mr. Haran. This is our local expert. He's our chief engineer.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, guys, I'm more nervous asking you guys this question than I normally am answering questions. I have two questions. The first thing is, I just wanted to say this is really awesome. March was National Engineering Month, which doesn't mean a lot to a whole bunch of people, but what you guys did was do a little bit of taking a difficult problem, looking at it, and solving the problem to help people live better lives, and that's awesome. So good work. So my question for you is, you mentioned the wider sidewalks. Does anybody remember how wide you planned in that drawing or in the diorama to make the sidewalks? Because I'm going to write it down and take note.
Well, I think we planned like 1.8, like bigger sidewalks.
Okay.
Right now they're at like 1.4 sidewalks, something like that.
Okay. So that was my first question.
They're like as narrow as this table.
So too narrow, you're saying. Okay.
Yep.
You know what? You said that drawing, that was to scale, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll take my ruler and go check.
All right.
That's awesome. Thank you. My second question, did you guys, I know it's hard to do it because you didn't do electrical in the diorama, but we're looking at that crosswalk, that one that's right there, just where that one. Do you have any ideas or suggestions about what we should put there in terms of like buttons or signals or anything there? What do you guys think?
Well, we should probably put like some like street lights and stuff like that, and like buttons. Okay.
What about if we put some buttons that if you press it, it starts to flash, and then all the cars know that someone's about to cross? Does that work
that
with
sounds
your
good.
design?
That sounds good.
I'll take that to note.
Or probably like
Thank
a
you.
red light or something.
Thank you, Mr. Haran. Let's come over on this side. Questions on? Yeah, we'll start with Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Thanks, you guys, for your presentation. That was awesome. How many meetings did you have before you were able to start doing this? How many?
How many times did we practice it?
No, but that's sometimes good to practice. No, how many meetings did you have before you came up with this design? So how many times did you get together and talk about it?
Like 10.
We had like 6 different groups.
Oh.
Design something on streetmix.net, and then we took the thing on streetmix.net and tried to put it on here onto the corridor.
So did you have a budget to do this?
Budget.
Do you know what a budget is?
No,
I don't really know what a budget
don't
either.
know
we didn't have a budget.
No, we didn't have a budget. Nope.
So do you?
We had a budget.
We got together like 5-10 times. I don't know.
So did you have a budget of money that you would allocate towards doing this project? Or?
No, but like.
I certainly have no clue.
If we did, we weren't.
Okay, no, wait. Okay,
Here
here
comes.
We weren't tasked with that. We thought
Darn
I would
it,
leave
because
that to the experts.
Yeah, we
thought-
actually weren't tasked with that.
I thought you were going to be able to answer all the problems for us and let us know how much it was going to cost, and that was going to alleviate every problem that we had.
I
I
think
think you
we've,
guys did a great job. So thank you very much.
I think
you.
we've identified a very good project for grade 6.
Of course.
Step 2, costing, and then grade 7, taxing.
You
All
got
right.
that right.
Thank you. Councillor Croft, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank you for your presentation. It was a terrific presentation, and I love the plasticine model. That one bus has fallen over, though. Yeah, I know you rescued
Yeah,
the
a couple
trees,
of
but
things
they
have
tend to
fallen
fall over. My question is around the hoarding job that you did around the Bowker project. The panels that you painted, it's called hoarding. Yeah.
Did you see them?
Yeah, I've seen them, and they look terrific. Did you all participate in that? Yes. And did all teams of everybody participate, or were there more of the students that participated in that project?
Every single student in the class made one.
Yeah, everyone
Okay.
in the class
Yeah.
did.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murdoch, please.
Yeah, thank you all for this. It was it's fantastic. It's fantastic. It's just fun to see the thought process and the detail that went into it. It's really well done. I thought the budget was covered by abstract. Actually, I thought that was the way this was going to work.
It might have been.
We could only hope.
My question was just the only question I had was on when you did the street width. Did you use the existing sort of street width from the edge of the sidewalk to the edge of the sidewalk and then work within that, or did
Kind of.
were you allowed to widen?
Yeah,
the road a little
yeah,
bit?
yeah.
Oh, very well done. Thank you very much.
I'm pretty sure we had like 18 meters of road.
Yeah, 18 meters
18
of road, so then
meters.
18 centimeters on here.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No problems.
If you would just return to your seats, and then
Okay.
Sir, yes, sir.
it's been a thrill having you here. You have done an amazing job at every turn. The research, identifying the problems, identifying options for solutions, planning for those solutions, and then doing this fantastic diorama. It really is amazing. And it's not just the work that you've done that's amazing, but the fact that you're engaging with your community. We had real questions. And this is very topical. Many places throughout our community have concerns about car speeds and biking right next to these speeding cars. So it is very important, this kind of work. And not that we can make you junior engineers and take you on staff, but it probably won't be long, I suspect, before you do that. So I want to thank you very much. Councillor Kirby, did you?
I just wanted to suggest that it's not the engineering part that I'm worried about. It's more that in 8 years we'll see them all here at council running against us.
So the very fact that you've engaged with your community is huge. And your art is wonderful. I was pleased to go up and help you unveil it. And it really shows that you've thought this through. So on behalf of our council and on behalf of our community, I want to thank you all very, very much for this. And special thanks to Mr. Murphy. I know when I spoke to him when I was at the school, he started down one avenue of kind of a teacher-led project, but soon realized that these kids were so capable, they were so interested and so driven to find solutions that he just let them go. And this is a fantastic outcome. And I know we've taken a lot of pictures, and I know Mr. Haran was listening very carefully. And this is the very kind of thing that we will integrate into our plans as we move forward as a community. So, Mr. Murphy, did you want to say something? Oh, you were standing up before? Yeah.
Well, I think I really thank you because I think you've made this very real for them because the challenge, you get a challenge and that's the opportunity. And when you provide the opportunity, this is what you get. So it's changed me as a professional, not just as a teacher, but as an administrator and how I look at learning. And I thank the province of British Columbia for giving us the opportunity to even think this way. So thank you to all of you. And how long before they have these designs implemented? What do you think, guys? We expect this in 3 years?
No.
Sorry. That's too long. They expect that earlier. Just joking. Anyway.
Well,
Definitely more than 3 years.
we'll see you all next year in grade 6 with the next part of this phase, and then in grade 7 for the taxing issues.
Yep,
So-
we'll see you next year. Yep.
Thank you very, very much. And thanks to all the parents who were there to support. And it does take a community to learn together and to to develop ideas and to not only to raise kids, but make our community better. Everyone has a part in it, and you've played an amazing part. So thank you all.
And I didn't want to neglect, I did want to acknowledge our Parent Advisory Committee chair. This is Cindy. So she's graciously come and she's been part of this along the way. And certainly Roy Brook, he's been a driving force behind this in terms of communicating with many of you and as well as in the community people. So we couldn't have done it without you, Roy. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Now comes the bad part. We're taking it away.
We'll just take a brief adjournment here, and once the diorama's all gone, then we'll go into formal session. Thank you.
Certainly.
Hello?
Thank you very much. We move on to the formal part of our budget estimates meeting tonight. This is the second, or really it's the third meeting we've had focusing on our budget. The first one was a joint meeting with the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Commission, where we examined their budget. And then the first estimates was on Thursday, April the 5th, where we received an overview regarding our strategic priorities. And we reviewed other documents such as the Citizen Budget Project. And then we went through the departmental budgets, starting with the corporate and finance. We moved on to building and planning. And then we looked at engineering and public works, both in the operating and in the capital. We have all of our senior staff here tonight, should there be any questions. And it is intended that this will be the final meeting, and then the next time we get together in budgetary items, it will be approving the final budget at council, at formal meeting of council. So, and before we start tonight's meeting, I just want to acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people, known as the Songhees and the Esquimalt Nation, and that their connections to this land continues to today. And it is especially noteworthy that we are on these lands. Myself and councillors attended the funeral of Chief Andy Thomas today, very moving affair over at the Esquimalt First Nations Longhouse. And it was a reminder of our connection to the First Peoples, and a reminder of the ongoing reconciliation that certainly Chief Thomas embraced, and his thoughtfulness in that regard is appreciated by all throughout the Capital Regional District. So we will start now with the departmental budgets. We're going to have a bit of a running total from time to time. We heard last time that the tax increase at that point was at 3.23. Do I have those numbers correct? 3.23%, of three of which percent I understand were from resulting from wages and the increase in our library budget. So as you can see, at least to this stage, other than those two items, it's a very small increase. Tonight we have the police, fire, and then emergency services. We're joined by Chief of Police, our fire chief, and our deputy fire chief. We will then review some referred items, which are not currently in the budget. And then at the end, we will give directions to staff to bring forward a budget to council for formal approval. We also will have an opportunity for public input after that is all done. So, and we do have, as I mentioned, our heads of departments here when we get to the stage of kind of finalizing our directions. So, I welcome, first of all, the Chief Constable, who is here. We have seen the provisional budget that came through in the latter part of last year, which was a budget that was recommended by the police board, and the police board is responsible as a delegated authority once the budget is approved. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Chief, and just walk us through, because we have looked at the provisional budget and walk us through any changes. And there's some I think you want to draw to our attention. And then we'll look at page 9 through to 13 of the budget. If I might just pull that up on the operating side. And that's where we'll find the police, or known as police protection, starting at page 9. So over to you, Chief Brinton.
Okay, as the mayor indicated, this budget was presented to you in the end of November, which is part of the legislation under the Police Act. Is we present it to our police board by the end of October, and then it comes to council by the end of November. So I won't go into a lot of the minute detail, but I will tell you that when I first presented it to you, and one caveat I should indicate is that these, again, a big portion of our budget is payroll and things that are linked to payroll, such as the benefits and that sort of thing. And we are currently in collective bargaining, and in fact, we're destined for arbitration in the fall. So the numbers that were used, and when I say percent increases and that sort of thing, this is obviously not taking salaries into account, or things that are linked to the salaries. There is some contingency built into the overall municipal budget to account for that, and that would be for all bargaining units, I would suspect. So I just wanted to sort of make that clear right out of the gate, because I don't want this to be seen as a bit of a false number, so to speak. So when I presented in November, it was a pretty modest increase. It was basically a $14,600 increase on a $4.8 million budget, which equated to 0.3% overall. There's been some changes since then. In fact, what we're presenting right now is a 1.61% increase, which represents $77,451. And where the bulk of that comes from is we pay to be a partner in the Vancouver Island Major Crime Unit, here, which is based here in Victoria, and they are the agency that deals with homicides, suspicious missing persons, major crime that meets a certain threshold. And we're part of that group along with every other police agency in the CRD, and in fact there's even discussions of moving that all the way up the island at some point. But it's a means of which all police agencies can meet the capacity to deal with major crime, and quite frankly with the standards that have been brought in by police services from the province, there is no other way. It'd be this similar to IHIT in the Lower Mainland that you often hear in the news. So VIMQ is sort of our version of IHIT for reference. So when I presented the budget initially, part of their funding formula, they sort of got 4 parts to it. Part of it is the police caseload, criminal code cases, population, but also there's what they call the 10-year homicide rate, and that's how many homicides a municipality will have within a 10-year period. And we were actually destined in 2018 to have the one sort of historic event that occurred in 2007 drop off. So we were actually destined to have a fairly significant reduction. Unfortunately, with a traumatic event on Christmas, there's been a readjustment to that. So at the end of the day, there's going to be I've got the figure written down here, a $48,134 increase to our budget. That's directly linked to the cost to be part of VIMQ. And on top of that, there's another $14,624, which is made up of things that we didn't foresee initially. Things like the ICBC rates have gone up. We don't actually get the final numbers for some of the benefits and the health coverage and things that the employer contributes to until usually into 2018. So those have all been received now. So those sort of two areas combined create a $77,454 increase over what I had initially proposed. So the net result is a 1.61% increase to the police budget. And I don't have a clear understanding of what that would represent in the overall municipal budget. I can say that we are probably about 25% of the overall municipal budget. So where that'll, I would be guessing it may impact maybe Debbie Carter could speak to that.
Ms. Carter, are you able to put that in some context?
So just for clarification, if I understand your question correctly, it's the portion that of the budget that belongs to police. Is that what you were referencing?
Yeah, I thought what might be of value to council is when I say it's a 1.61% increase to the police budget, what does that actually mean in the overall budget?
I believe it's a 0.36% tax increase.
Okay. So I just think that's important for you to know as a reference point. So I can take some questions or or if you want some more, detail comments. I can't say that, as we go through the budget, we see 2,000 increases here, 5,000 here, a 2,000 decrease here. So we've done what I believe is our due diligence to try to keep the numbers as accurate as we can to what to represent what our needs are in order to maintain the service level of service that we feel that the community expects from our police department.
Thank you very much, Chief. Now, what I propose to do is propose just to have questions to begin with on these new items, and then we'll go to the documents, pages 9 through 13. So are there questions on these new items that the Chief has referred to? Okay, go ahead, Councillor Murdoch, please.
It sort of relates to that anyway. Do we have any sense, is there any additional expected costs to the department with the investigation phase of the homicides last year?
No, I don't believe there's any additional costs expected. There may be some potential court appearances by some of our members, which might relate to some overtime related to that, but I don't expect any significant costs. And one of the aspects of being part of VIMQ is that we're responsible for scene security, and we're responsible for what's deemed as extraordinary costs, but your basic core costs associated with investigation are actually borne by the unit.
Thank you very much.
And in this case, just to follow up on that, in this case, extraordinary costs could be something, as I understand, like a wiretap investigation or something similar that goes beyond a typical
that's correct. There was some forensic work done in this case that was deemed extraordinary, but it was fairly nominal in cost.
And do you expect any other extraordinary costs, any other special investigations?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions on the new parts? Yes. Thank you very much. Councillor Kirby, please.
Thank you, Chair. I know this might be a little beyond the scope of this budget, but just understanding how this VIMQ unit works, and so I'm just trying to grapple with that. So our costs have gone up in relation to the fact that we have had an incident, a major crime. So do we get charged directly the costs of the incident, or do we pay an annual fee each year, and that's just grown this year? Or I'm just trying to understand how the costing works.
So they set a budget at the beginning of the year of what they anticipate it's going to cost them to do business for their year, and it's paid by all the partner agencies based on a formula. So the initial formula, the amount doesn't change. It's just how it gets dispersed. So we'll say that because our numbers were going to be going down, Victoria, Saanich, the RCMP, their numbers are actually going to be going up because it still has to be reconciled at the end. So what's happened is that because of our numbers are now up, in reality, Victoria's are probably down slightly. Just the disbursement changes, but it's not new costing.
So it's based on a percentage, based on the crime rate?
There's 4 factors to it, or I believe in. There's crime rate, there's population rate, there's a number of the number of police officers that agency has, and then what they call the 10-year homicide rate.
Okay, thank you. That helps me understand things better. And one more follow-up question. You mentioned that this may go up further up island. Would that expansion of the service up the island, would that help us financially?
I think it would be really. It's in very, very early stages of that discussion, but I'm part of the joint management team for the VIMQ unit. Every agency has someone sitting at it. We met this morning and talked about that briefly, and there may be some just, further partners, economy of scales, but at the same time, the unit would likely have to grow. So I wouldn't necessarily anticipate that it would save us reduce our costs that much. But we're a few years away from that happening, I believe.
Much like amalgamation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I see no other questions on the new bits. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if there are questions on any of the items, because we've seen these before, by the way. This is much like we've seen before, other than the new items that we saw in November. So are there any questions that you may not have asked at that time, or something new has occurred to you from page 9 through page 13? And there, as you can see, some of these items drill down quite a bit to how things are going with the 2008 Toyota and the Ford Explorer 2016, that kind of thing. So it's a very detailed, but you may have some detailed questions. Any questions on that? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Croft, please.
Through you, Chair. So on page 10, the contract BIIMCU was projected at $124,000. That's going to up $48,000 to $170,000. Is that correct?
No, this is actually the number it's going to be at. It was going to be lower than that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. No other questions? All right, thank you very much, Chief. Does anyone anticipate having questions for him? Oh, we're going to do capital. All right. All right, let's move to capital. All right. And it's on page 1. There are 5 items there. 3 of them are covered in part by what's described as non-tax revenue, so it would be coming out of reserves. So one is an air watch, replace MDTs, heat pump / air conditioner, office reorganization, and then a replacement of a vehicle. And you can see there's little bullets dots next to some of those, which means that, Chief, maybe I can ask you, does it mean that all of those 3 items will come out fully from reserves?
That's correct.
Okay. So the new items then are air watch, MDT, security, and heat pump / AC. Any questions on any of those, for that matter? Any of those 5? Councillor Ney, please.
Yes, I seem to find myself asking this question each time the vehicle purchases come up, but no electric cars yet, I guess. So I just wondered if you could speak to that, Chief, through your chair.
Actually this vehicle that we were purchasing this year, we actually did look at a lot of options. It's a minivan, basically what it is, and it's replacing the little Mazda, sort of the community policing. But what we found in the department is we're lacking that ability, that utility vehicle, where we can actually transport larger items. There was talk of a pickup truck at first, that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, we landed on minivan because it also, we can use it to transport people. So when a number of our members go to, a training facility, they can take that vehicle, put the seats down, use it to carry, seized property, that type of thing. But it's also something that we're going to get these sort of magnetic stickers and banners and stuff, so there can also be like a high-profile community engagement type of item. And we did look at like hybrid options and just the cost. We can buy a 3-year lease return minivan for, in the price range that we've got there, where, we're looking at 40, 50, 60,000 when we were looking for a vehicle that can create the same scenario, but it's in a hybrid version. An electric, they're not there yet for what we need this vehicle for.
Okay. Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, through
Councillor
you, Chair.
Nichols.
Just, I'm sure you did the analysis, but even if for the period of time that you would expect to own the van, and if you add in not only the capital costs, but the operating costs of the gas or whatever is being used, it still doesn't make it a case for.
I don't believe so, and to be quite frank, we don't use a lot of fuel in this community, like compared to other communities, just because it's so small. And the nature of this vehicle would probably be the type of vehicle where we, do a delivery, or we, come to the market and set up a bunch of banners. Like, it's not going to be something we're going to be putting a lot of miles on. And that's one of the reasons why we would likely be looking at probably a lease return, 3-year-old vehicle, because we probably wouldn't be racking up the miles on it.
Thank you very much. You do have the one hybrid, which is the administrative car.
We have two.
Two
hybrids.
And at some point, the administrative car comes up. That might be a consideration, because doesn't have all the lights and the bells and whistles. Is that correct?
That's true. We do have a certain requirement with our marked vehicles that they have to meet certain standards. So the only sort of wiggle room we would have right now would be perhaps in the administrative vehicles.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions about the capital? All right. So now I'm going to ask what I was about to ask before. Is there any reasons that the chief can't be excused at this point? Is there any anticipation of him having questions at the as we round up? No. All right. All right. Thank you very much, Chief. And before you go, I understand that there's a charity hockey game that's being organized by the police to raise monies for Cops for Cancer. There's going to be a police/staff game against Oak Bay High.
I looked at my hockey gear last night when I was looking for a jersey. My jersey's been laying at the bottom of the gear for 5 years, so it fermated quite nicely. But I just thought me playing hockey, it might be too early. It's too soon. Yeah. So I'll be there in a support role, running the bench or something like that. So.
All righty, but you look for that to come out and watch it.
I believe 23rd of April, I believe.
At the Oak Bay Arena.
That's correct. At 2 p.m.
Thank you very much. Well, we look forward to that. Thank you. Good. All right. And we're now going to move on to the fire chiefs and the deputies area. We have the fire chief, the fire department at pages 14 to 16. And maybe what we'll start with is asking the chief just to give a very high-level overview of the budget and how we are compared to other years.
Just looking for the spit. The kids had this one. Funny, the fire department has it. I just, anyway, thank you very much. We're looking at $36,000 worth of increase on a $4.2 million budget. That doesn't include the wage settlement that we just had last month. We have come to agreement with the IAFF, and as we've said before, there are reserves that have been set aside for those increases, but it's not actually reflected in the actual wage numbers in here. So that is one difference within this budget, and we'll be bringing that forth later at a budget revision to reflect what those numbers are as we move forward. So. ultimately, the costs that are involved in here are reflections of things that are beyond our control, such as crest, superannuation, insurance, water, all the things that keep the lights on within the department. And that's the most significant part of the budget. There was one overage in the budget last year that was somewhat significant, and that was in the equipment repairs. Our 27-year-old engine, as much as it's very, very well maintained, dropped the valve, which cost us 2 pistons, which cost us about $14,000 to repair. So that is the next truck that should be going out the door. It would normally have gone out at 25 years. We've tried to keep it going a little bit longer while we look at how we can fit another engine into the fire hall, because currently we're not sure if we can or not. So that's why we've kind of kept that one around, and you'll see later on in the capital section about some pieces with regards to looking at how we can modify the fire hall or open some doors and stuff so we can actually fit an engine into it now, because we're not in a position that we can do that with any manufacturer at the moment. So.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chief. We're looking at page 14 through to 16 inclusive. And to see, are there any questions on any of those figures or the notes that are on there? Yes, Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you to staff. I recall last year there was some problems with the washrooms. In particular, the sewer line, if I remember correctly, with the details. I haven't been by the fire hall lately. Just wondering how's it going, and was the budget spent appropriately, and do you need any more?
So yes, we ended up, police and fire ended up having a new line set to the CRD trunk line that's in the back. We're a bit of an anomaly because we have because of when we were built and where we were built, we're not on a municipal system, we're on the CRD system. And so there's a cap that goes down about 18 meters to where the CRD trunk line is. And so we have to tap into that system. Or pardon me, 20 feet, 18 feet. And so we were able to secure a contract with the company last year to come in and replace the lines for both the police and the fire department, and we can flush the toilets again, so that part's working.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, questions from Councillor Braithwaite, and then Councillor Kirby, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I noticed that on page 15, under training, you have the confined space rescue that you do for UVic and for our, with the Saanich Fire Department and for our Public Works Department. And I noticed that it's at $50,000, and as we found out last week, we're only getting maybe just $50,000 from UVic, from the province for UVic. So it's interesting that we are putting in probably half of this amount of money, $25,000, let's say, into the training for to be able to handle calls from UVic, and yet the province is only giving us $50,000. So that's just another point on the money that we're getting from the province.
All right, thank you.
So I just want to clarify on that piece. So $5,000 is the fee that UVic pays us for the confined space piece. The $50,000 is for the training of all of the fire department, right? So, but that's our training costs for the fire department are significant because of the skill levels and the certifications that we need to maintain in order for us to be able to provide the service. And so that's the significant piece of this. We get a check from UVic once a year for $2,500 for us to do their standby and do their training session. And it takes us about a week to go through the system up there at UVic and the various holes that we have to pull people out of. And that's so that UVic can meet their work safe requirements. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for pointing that out, Councillor Braithwaite. Over to Councillor Kirby, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question about the health and wellness program, and I'm just wondering if that's ongoing. It's only $10,000, and I'm just wondering if I think that's reduced over time, or is that how much it cost initially? And I remember that it brought down your overtime costs initially a couple of years ago, and I'm wondering if that's a trend that's continuing.
Yes, thank you for asking. That's the continuing maintain number with our contractor, our registered nurse, to help provide the service, as well as with the chaplaincy that we were managing within the department. And so we've been able to maintain our programs and to continue to reduce our sick time. And it has, in that aspect, it has helped us with our overtime. And this year, in the contract that we just settled, the IDF, the employer and the IAAF have also made an agreement on a backfill for training overtime, which will now be at straight time, where it was at time and a half before. So we should have a very good idea next year as to what our overtime budget may or may not look like, and what and how we can reduce it after we get our experience this year with regards to that. But we feel that that's going to be fairly significant.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much. Any other questions about those pages? Okay. Thank you very much, Chief. We move on to the page following. I was going to do emergency services, so we kind of wrap them all in, and then we'll go on to capital. Yep. Page 17. Welcome, Deputy. And this is, I think you're going to answer any questions. I understand you're going to get the easy questions. Any difficult ones here, we'll go to the Chief. Is that how you've divided the responsibilities tonight?
Yes, Your
That's
Worship.
what I
I believe the hard balls.
It's very good.
Heading.
So any lob ball questions for the Deputy, or any questions on that page at all? Okay. Councillor Zelko, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I can't pass up this opportunity to grill the Deputy. A question in particular about any possible grant programs that could be available for emergency programs at the local level. I'm thinking in particular the National Disaster Mitigation Program, or possibly some others. And I also was chatting with someone. I was at the Songhees Reserve today, chatting with the folks over there about their emergency program, and they're wondering what to do about Chatham Island, which isn't exactly in Oak Bay, but I know we kind of help out. And I know there's potentially possibly, related to that, maybe some grants related to First Nations that we might maybe be eligible for. I just wanted to maybe float those ideas and see whether there's any, through the chair, whether your department has been thinking about this. Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor. As far as I'll deal with the First Nations part and Chatham Island, I don't have any information on that and haven't looked into those areas. However, when we flip over to the capital requests coming up, I will have some more information about some significant provincial grants.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Any other questions? All right. Sorry, Councillor Croft.
Through you, Chair. And the recoveries, it's quite a large amount in the budget. Can you tell me what that is? Through the Chair, yes, Councillor. That is through EMBC. We get those grants through the province, and it pays for all that training. That line item you can see is on there as 8,600 because we can't guarantee those funds, but the province has been great with a lot of training money for our personnel. So it's essentially an offset? Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think we're ready to move on now to the capital. And there are 3 items. Let me ask you the same way I asked the Chief. There's of police. I noticed of the 3 items, 2 of them are starred, or little bullets, which indicate non-tax revenues. Is that completely reserved on those 2 items, which is the emergency program trailer, ESS mobilization, 10,000, and fire department renovation, 40,000?
Well, I'll speak to the ESS mobilization, Your Worship. The $10,000, that's actually part of a community emergency preparedness fund from the province. So we actually are receiving $21,000 through that grant program, and we're going to take the 10 out of reserve to utilize the funds, and then it just gets placed back in the reserve fund from that grant. And then there's extra money, but we'll be able to work within the operating lines to capture that grant money.
Okay. Now, Chief, then I take it you're going to look at fire department renovation. How much of that 40,000 is or is that also you?
Well, not the bathroom, but we do have an additional grant coming that we were just informed of, and that's another $25,000 that will, from the province, that will also be coming our way.
But that doesn't go into the renovations.
That's not
there's
the
still emergency
renovations.
program.
That's right.
That's excellent.
Yeah, that's all
excellent.
grant in the emergency program side.
How are the grants going in the on the fire side, Chief? My gosh, he set you up, didn't he?
It was nice that he went first. Now for the bad news.
I guess you're going to shift. You're going to change his shift, eh?
Yeah,
Lots of
just a little
midnights
bit.
ahead. Okay.
Yeah, so on the fire side of things, there's an issue, a significant issue with the dorm flooring upstairs.
No, I'm just going to ask. My question really was: of the fire department renovation, 40,000. There's
okay.
a star.
Yep.
Does that mean it's all coming out of?
That's reserve.
Okay, so
Yep,
that's all
yep,
reserve.
yep.
So now let's go back to the dorm flooring. Now
Yep.
that's the one that's coming out of taxes.
That's a tax
this
one,
year,
yes.
and that's 7,000.
Yeah.
Okay, just give us a
And,
heads up
and I
on
don't
that.
have a fund to take that out of, so that's why it's there. So.
Okay. All right.
And so we have the fire hall flooring was put in place in 1950. We're now in a position where the seams have, as much of the maintenance as we've been able to do, the seams have split. The floor has holes in it in the dorm, and it's actually rolling up, and people are tripping on it. So we got a quote to replace it with a marmoleum floor in the amount of just under $7,000, which will give us about a 10-year guarantee on the floor. Certainly, I don't think we're going to get the 60-year guarantee, 70-year guarantee that we had on the last one, because they don't make that floor anymore. We're going to do a subfloor over and seal what we have, so that we don't have any surprises with it. It's the way to go, and it will give us a new floor, because there is some rippling and stuff in that old 80-year-old floor that we have there. So that's the avenue that we're looking to do.
Thank you very much. Now, is there any questions on any of the three capital items? No? Okay, thank you very much to both of you. I'm going to ask the same question of council. Is there any reason that we need the chief and the deputy before we excuse them to duke it out outside? Okay, go ahead. Is there any reason to keep them here? No?
I just did have a question about the doors, the trucks, because you said you were going to get to that later. But so the truck, the 27-year-old truck, is due for replacement 2 years ago, and so what I'm grappling with here is that this means it's either a new truck that has to be custom built again to fit those doors. But I think there's more to it. Like you said, there's not enough space for another truck. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So where we're at is that the trucks that we have in the 1965 side of the building, they will not fit into the 1938 portion of the building, because the length of the floor is too short on the apparatus. And so what we're looking to do, and one of the reasons that we built that small battalion truck to get some of the stuff off of that other engine, was to give us an opportunity to have our builder build a truck that's shorter, the same length as what we have in that 27-year-old truck, and take a couple of boxes off the back of it, so that the equipment now is in Battalion 1, and we'll be able to roll that truck in. The problem that we have, though, is that the cab size of the new trucks and our width will not fit in the 1938 opening. We need, we're at 120 inches across, and it's just under 10 feet tall where the peaks start, or 9 feet tall where the peaks start. We need to get to 129 in order for us to get the trucks to go in. Currently in the 1965 side of the building, we have 1.5 inches clearance on each side of the mirrors every time the guys drive the trucks in and out. So it's significant what we're trying to do here in managing in that building. But our Sutphen has indicated to us that they can build us a custom vehicle. They just can't downsize the cab size and stuff. So we have Herald Engineering engaged right now to see if we can actually cut into some of the size, the engineering piece of the seismic upgrade that we had that closed the doors in, to open it up a little bit, build some framing in there, and go into the opening of the door, as we did to the door where the ladder truck came in, because we had to do the same thing there when we opened that. The challenge in doing that is that it will have to go before Heritage. It'll have to go for permissive on that, and look at what we can actually do with the building, because it will impede slightly into the timber facade that's up there to make it look. So it'll kind of give it an offset. We have to figure out how to make it look the same. So.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Just one
Councillor
follow-up
Kirby.
then. I hesitate to bring this up because we want this to be a very quick meeting, right? But I can't help but think that if we're going to be spending much more on a brand new truck that has to be custom fit, and repairing of doorways and redesigning the doorways and retrofitting, I mean, I hope we're keeping this in mind in the whole asset management plan, and ensuring that we're not investing too much and getting too deep in before we realize that we need a new fire hall, and that that this is just, I mean, it makes me very nervous to see that. I know you're pushing the life of that one truck, and I appreciate all that you do, but I hope that that's being looked at.
Okay. It will be in the fullness of time and in other budget years, so thank you for that comment. So it's not going to impact this year's budget? Right. All right. Thank you. So my question again, any reason why they need to stay? Nope. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your coming here. All right. We now going to go on to referred items, which is under the tab Referrals. There are 20 items there. Typically I'd start with number 1, but I'm going to start with number 17 because that's the huge item that has not been funded. And I understand that Ms. Carter has some comments on how that could be funded. Item 17, and that's Cadboro Bay Bike Lanes, request for funds to build bike lanes on Cadboro Bay Road, 230,000. Okay, great. Everyone on the same page? Referrals. Yes, we'll move on to referrals on the tab Referrals. Yep. Okay, we'll just make sure we're all on the right page. We're all caught up. Okay, good. Now, Ms. Carter, what can you say about the 230,000?
Through your worship, the Cadboro Bay bike lanes, at the end of 2017, we did have some surplus funds that I was able to set aside based on the fact that I knew this was a priority for council. So if council chooses to fund this project, it would not impact taxes this year.
Okay. Yeah, and the reason I brought that forward is because it may have impacted some of the other items, the other 19 items there that will, in part, well, I think all of them, impact taxes. Okay, so let's go up. You have a question on that?
If I
on
may,
that issue, yep.
Sure, through
Go
Chair.
ahead, Councillor Murdoch.
I was wondering where we're getting money from it, so I was just going through our reserve funds, and I noticed we have a bike lane reserve last count of 152,527, and active transportation reserve of 14,036. Is the funds of any of that coming out of those reserves, or is this coming out of some other reserve fund?
Through the chair, I set aside exactly the 230,000 from surplus, so it would not impact those existing reserves already.
Okay.
So it's 2017 reserves. Sorry, surplus. Yeah, thank you.
And how much surplus do we have in total in 2017?
We don't actually have that number quite yet. We're still working with the auditors to finalize the financial statements.
Okay. I guess my only thought on that, when it's just, again, without a policy to say where this is going into, we're sort of saying, okay, we'll take it for this, but we're not spending it on roads or something else that we have that we could put it into. So it seems very arbitrary to sort of say the surplus goes to this, because it really going into reserves, and we should be determining, I guess, where those reserves are coming out of.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. We are putting it in reserve. So council has complete discretion to reallocate should they choose.
Okay, thank you. So let's go back up to number 1, the Maritime Museum of BC Society. Last year we gave them 1,000. This year they've asked for 2,000. I'm wondering, should we just do show of hands or mini motions to, that might be the best, so. Yes, why don't we do the referred items, and then there are 3 items changes that Ms. Carter is going to come up with to what we'd already looked at. So, let's see if there's a show of hands for anyone who wishes to increase their budget by 100% or the grant by 100%. That's what they're doubling essentially, right? Or do we keep it at last year's total, at last year's figure, or somewhere in between? Anyone want to have a suggestion? Go ahead, Councillor Kirby.
I'd start with the Friends of Uplands Park on number 4. Is that what you're saying?
No, we're starting at number 1.
Oh, I thought you
Maritime
wanted to.
Museum of
I thought
BC.
we were just gonna. If you had one that you wanted to see raised.
No, we're just going to go down and.
Oh, one by one. Okay.
One by one. That's probably the
Okay.
best.
I would suggest $1,500.
Okay. Is there a consensus?
Second.
I think we'll just see if there's a consensus
Okay.
at this point. Is there a consensus that 1,500 is valid? Yes.
And I would suggest 1,000.
Okay, so that's last year's figure. All right, let's see, take a straw poll at 1,000 from last year. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's 1,000 from last year. Thank you. And you're keeping a running total, I understand, and there's a percentage somewhere there. All right, good. Thank you. Oak Bay Heritage. Yeah, that's a lot better. Okay. Oak Bay Heritage Foundation, last year was 3,000. This year they've asked for 4,000. Any suggestions?
I would suggest 4.
Is there a consensus on that? Show of hands, 4,000.
Can you just review what the $1,000 increase is going to cover? I know Mr. Murdoch, Councillor Murdoch is here.
Sure, if the chair wishes, I can.
Yes, go ahead, please. Yeah,
so the reason for there's a number of reasons, but the primary reason is just the last year there was 5 new designated houses added. This year there's 2 more already on the piece. So the expectation is that the number of grants is going to go up, and they're upwards of $10,000 each. So they have some money in reserves, but they're expecting that there's going to be a bit more of a draw. We cut it down a few years ago as there was not much draw on it, so this is sort of to bump it back up a bit closer to historical levels.
All right.
It is anticipatory, not reactive to actual grants, although there's been probably 12,000 or so grant applications come in this year, so it will be spent.
Okay. So let's does that answer your question, Councillor Croft? Thank you. Show of hands, 4,000. Is that what we feel is appropriate? I don't see anyone else for another figure, so 4,000, please. Thank you. Next item is a South Island Prosperity Project that we became members of. I know our representative, our liaison there is Councillor Croft. If there's any particular questions, Councillor Croft, did you want to speak to this amount? It was the same as last year, and I think, was it how long a commitment was it that we made?
It was a 3-year commitment that we made.
And this would be...
This is the final year of the...
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Murdoch.
Just so I'm clear here, I'm looking at the sheet we have. The amount included in budget is 0 across all of these, so even though we made that 3-year commitment and it's there, it is not currently included in the budget. So the 43,000 would be about 0.25% increase over what we've talked about so far. Is that? Just make sure I'm clear on what we're doing here. There's none of these are included in the current budget.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think there might be a little one, number 18, but it amounts to about $500. Okay, So we made a commitment. Does anyone wish us to back away from that commitment? I don't see anyone doing that, so we'll continue that. And okay, thank you. Yes, thank you.
So just to add to that, the grants and aid, the ones that we provide the same amounts for every year are in fact included in the budget. So like the BIA and the church and things like that. And in hindsight, next year I'll consider putting in the amounts that we have already agreed to.
Okay. And in past, we've also put in the previous year's amount, and then we generally decide whether or not to, on the increase. So for instance, I think we used Oak Bay Service, volunteer services, we would put the base amount in and then just discuss any increase, okay? But this year, none of that's in there. We're at number 4, Friends of Uplands Park. Last year, they had 2,000. This year, they'd like 2,500.
I would like to put in the 2,500.
2,500, yeah.
Great.
Is there consensus there? Thank you. Oak Bay Volunteer Society, last year they 30,000. This year there's 35,000. So it's an increase of 5,000. Anyone wish to speak on that?
I'm in favor of increasing their budget by $5,000 based upon the presentation by the executive director.
Okay. Yep. I think they're taking it in a new and new direction and with a new energy. Perhaps that should be encouraged, but do I see any objections to that? No? Okay, thank you. 35,000, please. Community Association of Oak Bay, they're asking the same thing this year as they had last year, 2,000. Anyone who wish to pull back on that? None? Okay, we'll go with 2,000 there. The next one is Vancouver Island Film and Media Commission, 10,000 last year, 10,000 this year. They're the ones that bring in a relatively significant every year amount of film income from companies that shoot films here, which generally exceeds this and allows us to fund other items. Councillor Croft, please.
I had a question around Parks, Recreation, and Culture, and this is a cultural item. I'm thinking that at some time we need to develop a cultural budget that includes all the revenue and all the expenses so that we can see them all in one house. And I'm not asking for that now, but I just think in the future, because there seems to be bits and pieces, and it's kind of hard to follow what our actual costs are with the investment that we're making in culture.
Okay. And this year, though, we're okay with 10,000. Thank you very much. The next one is Greater Victoria Bike to Work Society, 2,000 last year. They're asking for the same amount. We funded them for many years. We're all okay with that. Oak Bay Music Society, 500 last year. They want 500 this year, and probably the same thing that you said, Councillor Croft, applies to something like this and partnering with it. Is there anyone who wishes to change directions on that? No? Thank you. The next one is the part-time Bowker Creek Coordinator. Last year was 10,518. This year is 10,781. We've supported the part-time coordinator for quite some years now. Councillor Zelko, and then Councillor Murdoch.
Thank you, Chair. I know a fair bit of work has been done in the Bowker Creek area. It's behind Oak Bay High School this year in particular. And I know just getting that stretch of Bowker Creek ready for handover to the school board. So I definitely would like to see this continue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Murdoch.
Just so I'm clear, this is, did we not have, we had this as a 3-year sort of agreement 3 years ago, 2016, so 16, 17, this is the 3rd year of a 3-year funding agreement, is that correct?
Through the chair, my understanding from the minutes was that it was to be approved annually, even though it was agreed upon in principle for 3 years.
Okay, so any other comments on that? Seeing none, I think we'll just leave it where it's proposed, 10,781, $10,781. Okay, thank you very much. The next one is Need to Suicide Prevention, Education and Support. We didn't support them last year, and it was quite a difficult and emotional debate, I think, for all of us. We had in the past supported them. and they had some funding difficulties from VHA, now known as Island Health, and they do some work in our community. As I said, we had, I think, gave them notice, I would say 4 years ago, something like that, that we would slowly withdraw our funding, given that I think the majority of us felt it was an island health issue that should be done through that agency. And I mean, I don't think any of us around the table would say there isn't a need for this kind of thing. But the question was who's best placed to fund it, and certainly in past we have thought it was VHA, now Island Health. So is there anyone that wants to go back on where we're heading? Councillor Kirby, please.
I think that until the services provided by Island Health and the gap is filled in, that need to provides a necessary suicide prevention, education, and support in both Oak Bay High, Lansdowne, and Monterey Middle Schools. I think that's an essential service that we at $1,000 in our millions of dollars, I think is such a minor cost, but sends a strong message that we feel a responsibility to contribute to the education of youth in our community on this very important issue. And I feel compelled to continue to support them until we see greater funding coming from Island Health or the Ministry of Children and Youth. There is a gap, and they're there. They exist because it's needed, and they also are a volunteer-run organization. It's a not-for-profit, so it's not. We aren't funding anything extravagant. These are volunteers that need our support in the community, and I think it's a valued service that Oak Bay should reinvest or invest in.
Thank you. I don't think any of us would gainsay that it's not a critical service, much like no one would say that an emergency ward is not a critical service. I don't think any of us would say that kids shouldn't be educated. Again, we have schools for that. So I know it's a very difficult decision for us, but there are the appropriate agencies for these very things, and that I guess that's why I think all of us would agree with you. It's critical, and education is good, but then the question is who really should be funding this. And certainly I think we've debated this a number of times, and I think we've come down on the fact that either the school board should be looking after this if it's educational, or VHA, Island Health now, should be covering this. So does anyone, yes, Councillor Day, then Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Did we have information about what other districts are funding this program? When the presentation came, I just can't recall.
I don't recall. I think we have all of those in our package somewhere. What the not the discussion or the question and answer, but they're in there at some point.
Does anybody at the table have that information? Because I couldn't find it there, but maybe I just didn't look carefully enough.
I think. Well, it's at item 19 on our iPads. There was some original correspondence January 30th, and then there was an addendum and supplemental information April 11th.
So we don't have that information because I couldn't see it in here. But.
Okay, Councillor Braithwaite and then Councillor Murdoch, please.
Yeah, I think that this program I know is funded through partially funded through United Way as one of the agencies that does give them money. I think that I totally hear what you're saying, Councillor Kirby, but I have to agree with the mayor that it's something that should be funded either through the school board or through Island Health. I think that with the new government in place right now, and the line that they are taking to support mental health and PSTD, etc., that perhaps maybe now it's going to come to the forefront more so. So I would prefer not to fund this out of our budget, but to leave it for the province and agencies like United Way.
Councillor Murdoch?
I think we've had this debate over and over again. It's $1,000. I think we should just call the question and decide and move on.
Well, we don't have a question to call at this point, so.
I suggest that we
Councillor
leave it at $0.
I'm sorry.
Suggest that we just leave it as it is, $0.
Okay. Councillor Croft?
I would have to say, in agreement that we would leave it there, that their total budget that they're looking for fundraising is $470,000, of which this is $1,000. They are receiving $80,000 a year from Island Health. They're receiving money from all over the place. Our portion of the municipal grant is $43,000 for the municipalities. Ours is $1,000. I don't see that it would make a difference to their overall operations.
Okay, Councillor Ney, and then we'll go to Councillor Kirby.
My
and I'll
comments
call the
are,
question.
it's not a lot of money, but the issue here is, I appreciate that there are different jurisdictions, but this one's a little bit blurred in the sense that it's mental health, it's education, it's community support, it's for our youth, and there are many programs that we do that you could say, well, that's, for example, arts. Arts, you could say, well, that's for the CRD or for the province or to fund, and we could say the same for this, but they are in our community. They've got the numbers, how many young people they interact with. It's a critical role. They're reaching out for money from multiple sources, and that's not an unusual thing for a community group to do. It addresses health and safety, which is an objective of our community, and it's a small sum of money, so I'm going to support the payment of this.
Okay. Councillor Kirby, have the last word.
Thank you, Chair. I thank you for saying exactly what I wanted to say, which is that, we have other programs like the Friends of Uplands Park that are the restoration of the park is funded through a federal grant. It's funded through the municipal budget of parks and through contributions from community members. So there are similar asks on our list here, and this one just happens to have several other funders that come from other varying levels of government and the not-for-profit side. And I think $1,000 probably the reason that's at that figure is because that would pay for bringing in the education components to those 3 schools in our community that need this service. So it's our contribution towards ensuring that our youth are receiving those sessions and education and support. So I would suggest that we restore the funding.
Okay. So let's, how many are in favor of leaving it the way it was last year? Okay, so it'll be left at that. Thank you. City of Victoria Canada Day last year, because it was a special anniversary. It was $5,000 this year. I think they're back to where we typically fund them. It's we don't have July 1st celebrations here. We have June 30th celebrations. Leaving it as, well, not leaving it, but going back to the original amount. We okay there? I see anyone against that? We have a new item at 13. It's the first time we got the Greater Victoria Green Team, $5,000 for operational purposes. I think there was a lot of questions when they were here about what is the overlap between them and Friends of Uplands Park and some of the other agencies, but how do people feel about this $5,000? Councillor Murdoch.
Well, I think it's worth supporting them. I would probably put the funding this year at $2,500 in line with the Friends of Uplands Park, and we'll just it's the first year we're funding them. I think keeping them in comparable numbers makes a certain amount of sense, and we'll just sort of see what value we're getting out of that.
Is there consensus from that? I see nodding. I see 2 nods, 3 nods. I see a puzzled look on Councillor Croft.
Yeah, I from my conversations I had in the community, we get way better service from the Friends of Uplands Park for the investment that we make. with them than what we will ever get from the green team, because again, it's going into a general fund that will be used throughout many communities, not just necessarily our community. If we were going to do the kind of work that the green team does, I would prefer to see our Friends of Uplands Park get it than a new organization that is working in tandem, but at least we have a good working experience with the Friends of Uplands Park rather than this new organization. I just find it really kind of confusing to me to have another organization coming in that's doing similar things that our organization does and that they work together as well. So where's it coming? Where's it going?
Okay. I think that's a valid point. Councillor Kirby, please.
I think the presentation answered that question for me, because I was thinking the same thing, that we should just be investing in a local community group rather than expanding something that goes more regionally. But this team bolsters the numbers dramatically of people that are helping remove with invasives removal. When there is a project day or a work day, work bee, whatever, a pulling of weeds, there's far more people come because of the green team. And because they have a volunteer coordinator that is employed as an employee, and it's not a volunteer driven organization, they have that capacity to bring in huge numbers of people to get a lot of more work done. And I've been to all of the events that the Friends of Uplands Park put on, and I'm not saying that they don't do huge amounts of work and consistently throughout the year, but when you invite the green team to come, there are 10 times the people. So I think it's a worthwhile investment, and they also engage with youth, which I think, and the university, which I think is also beneficial. As I think we discussed when they came to council, reduce the average age of the volunteers dramatically and ensure that this is an ongoing, sustainable model.
Thank you. Here's why I would agree with Councillor Croft. We all received an email today from our Director of Parks, Recreation and Culture, who was forwarding an email from our Parks Manager. And part of that email had volunteer hours in our parks. This is for 2017 only. So there were 150 public events, so one almost every other day. Volunteer restoration hours, 446. Individual hours by Margaret and Willie, or Wiley. That's Friends of Uplands Park, 160. Willows and School and others in the Uplands, 496 hours of volunteers. Margaret Jenkins, are you sitting down for this? 2,195 hours they put in. So when I hear you say, yeah, it's going to bring in different age groups, we are bringing in different age groups. And there was Christine Dean Johnson and a group in Anderson Hill. They put in 80 hours. Carol Davies and a group of Native Plant in Brighton Trail, 135 hours. Then there was the Monteith Native Plant Group, Bowker Creek Bioallotment Gardens, 100 hours. And then Glen Lyon, although we're on the beach, not in parks, but people use it as a park, 240 hours. So total volunteer hours, 3,912 hours. We don't need to pay someone to gather volunteers. They're coming out on their own and more than eager to do so. So I would think we say, thank you very much for your offer, but we've got all these other groups. So I would agree that I don't think this is the time to kind of move our volunteer dollars over to them. I would say that we spend some of this and towards recognizing our current volunteers. So, Councillor Croft and Councillor Ney. Sorry, I had Councillor Ney first.
Well, I was going to say, I appreciate the information you've just brought to us, Mr. Mayor, but I wished I had more information about exactly what they have done. I have anecdotal stories that I bump into the workers on the Brighton Way as they're working there, and they're totally in awe with the work that the Green Team has done, and very grateful for it. And I guess when I've watched the Green Team work on a couple of projects in the community, they're a group of young people. They're very focused. They're highly energized, and it's a very intense piece of work. They seem to just motor through a project like they steamroller through, and it's very energizing for the other volunteers who are working around, like our community volunteers. So I think it's supportive kind of help. It comes in, it does the job, and it pulls away and supports the other. And I appreciate the point the mayor is talking about, like, can we ramp up more our volunteer? I suppose we could, but this is very little money. We have a very green community that where invasives are just growing all the time, and there's always work for them to do. So I think it's very little money for a really good piece of work. So I think Councillor Murdoch's suggestion, I don't know if you're going to stick with it, of putting in $2,500 and watching carefully what the nature of the projects are. And I would like to talk, have more consultation with our volunteer groups about the value that Green Team offers to them.
Okay, anyone else have any comments? So what's the consensus on 2,500? How many people think that that's appropriate? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 2,500. Thank you very much. BC Accordion and Tango Society. It's the World Accordion and Tango Festival. And one of the reasons they turned to us was the Dave Dunnett Theater they were hoping to get. I'm not sure if we've had any update as to whether or not we can provide them with one of our dates if we partner with them. Is there any tangoers in the audience? No? All right. So I think I certainly was of the view that we would be better off if they partnered with us for the one night and we arranged for one of our free nights there. I see Mr. Herman in the audience. How much is that approximately if someone were to rent that for the better part of a day, actually, because I think they run it during the day and into the evening. I know to put you on the spot. Yeah, for free. Does anybody know around the table? No? Councillor Braithwaite?
Well, I mean, I think that we could offer them one of our sessions, but they would then have to cover the cost of the janitorial staff, et cetera. I think that's correct, is it not, Mr. Harmon?
And how much is the janitorial staff?
Yeah.
So what we could do is we could offer them the 5 hours of janitorial service and then suggest that they partner with the culture side of Oak Bay Rec and Culture.
Yeah, I would say that probably in the range of $250 or something like that would.
Okay.
Or 500, are you thinking?
All right, for 2 days?
So
okay, that sounds
$500,
reasonable.
and then we
So
can
the
offer
suggestion
them
is for 500 and then a letter suggesting that if they partner with us, we can arrange for a free use of that. Okay? Go ahead, Councillor Croft, please.
They have made an application to tourism as well. So
Okay.
we don't know what the result of that is yet. So we might want to just wait to hear what all of these other things are before we decide on this. But
Okay, so that's going to make it a little problematic, but it could be $500 if they're unable to obtain resources from other parts of our community. Is that how you would phrase that? So it's conditional?
well, we've always had a little bit left over in case of applications that came in after the budget of about $10,000 that we've had in the past. So, it could be included in that. We don't have to make a decision now until they've examine their other sources
I
of
see.
funding. You know, I'm not thinking, but you can decide how you want to do it. You know, you may just want to say, if we do it, we provide $1,000 and it goes in, and then we wait to see what they get elsewhere. You know, I think 500 is probably a little light based upon the request.
Okay. So let's see if we can't nail something down. Councillor Kirby, then Councillor Mordaunt.
I just wanted to note that their request includes a venue rental of $7,000. So this was half the venue rental costs that they're anticipating for, and that it's all taking place in Oak Bay, if I understand correctly from the application. So that means it's $7,000 for all of the performances that they're using our Dave Dunnett Theatre for.
So that's just from the Dave Dunnett Theatre? Is that how you read that?
Yes.
Or is that for all of their rentals?
I think that's, well, it says venue rental, $7,000, but there's no mention of any other location that they're hosting.
But we do know they're hosting elsewhere.
They're performing elsewhere.
Yep.
Inside.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So that was my recollection.
Okay. Right. I suppose, hey? That wouldn't be
Okay.
pleasant. Oh, right. UVic School of Music, 5 days,
Yep.
and the Dave Dunnett Theatre, 3 days. So I guess it's to offset the portion of venue rentals at UVic School of Music, 5 days, and the Dave Dunnett Theatre.
Okay, Councillor Murdoch.
I guess I would just argue, I mean, I thought the presentation was of interest, and if we're supporting the arts in our community, then I think the performance arts are a portion of that as well. And I think that, you know, this is not an annual year-over-year piece. It's a world festival. I mean, it's an odd one, I grant you, but it's a worldwide festival coming for once into Oak Bay, and we have a chance to support it. I think we have. It's not a lot of money. I think even $3,500 isn't a one-time cost. Isn't a large amount of money. I think putting at least, you know, $2,000 or $3,000 in here in our thing and trying to find some in-kind use of that would make me more comfortable than trying to say 500 and hope that might cover some weird portion of what they're asking for.
Okay, so maybe another way to do it is to approve the 3,500 if they're unable to partner and obtain the facilities free of charge of the Dave Dunnett Theatre, because that's also possible. They can do that. So I don't think we want to be in a position we give money and the theatre too. It's one or the other. That would be my view. Councillor Kirby, then Councillor Braithwaite.
I was just going to say that I agree that it seems like I would be very uncomfortable with only $500. I think this is a worthwhile investment because most of the events, I think not all of them are free events for the audiences. So this is an opportunity for the community to experience something unusual and fun and in November when we need it the most.
That's when you need to tango. So the suggestion was 3,500 unless they're able to obtain free rentals of the Dave Dunnett. How's that? So it's conditional. We're okay with that? All right. Consensus? Thank you. So it would go in as 3,500, but we may not be using it. Okay? So you realize that that'll be conditional on them. Okay, thank you very much. Number 15, Canadien francophone games. Jeux canadien francophone, probably the other way around.
Can I just ask a question of
Yes,
clarification?
of the last one?
No, on this one.
On this one?
It does say held in 2018, but they're actually going to be held in 2020, are they not?
Yes.
Okay.
They're a ways off. And I don't
Right.
think that we've been in negotiations with them because I understand they're going to want a lot of our fields. And it may well be that we end up giving them more in-kind donations than 10,000. That was my only concern. I don't think we're far enough along to know how much are in-kind contributions. Mr. Herman, I take it you haven't made any commitments on use of variety of fields that we have at our disposal. The parks, I think they wanted to have opening and closing either opening and or closing at Willows as an example. But how do we do that, Ms. Carter, in a budget where we want to give in kind, some cash and some in kind, where we haven't defined it quite yet, how much is in kind?
We should put in the budget for an estimated dollar amount. The in-kind would not be included in the budget. It would be absorbed elsewhere within the budget.
Okay. Councillor Zelka, then Murdoch, then Braithwaite.
Thank you very much, Chair. I noticed in item 15 is an incredible amount of information that really has a 3-year overview of the information provided by the society organizing the Francophone Games for 2020. However, you know, from a perspective in terms of looking at what might be asked not only this year but also next year and the year after, I know that if we want, I don't know whether it's appropriate this year, but if we want, I notice that there is a member of the proposal of the committee here in the audience who possibly could present some information if we wanted that. But with respect to this budget, I noticed that the 2018 grant application form is only asking for $10,000. And in particular, it's essentially to get things going. And if I could just quote one piece here, once we have secured some funds, the Francophone Affairs program from the provincial government will match the funding granted by any municipality. And I know they're asking for funds not only from us, but also from Saanich and Esquimalt and Victoria. So basically, this is just to get them going.
Okay. Is there agreement that we would have people have questions? We can ask the representative here. We'll get to that in a minute. Before that, we have Councillor Murdoch and Councillor Braithwaite.
Well, I guess, you know, Councillor Zelke hit sort of my point on the nose. I'm not, this is a 3-year ask. If you actually read the thing, it's 10,000 this year, then 20,000 each successive year. So I think it's an interesting ask because it, you know, are we committing to $50,000 for this event as a municipality? And I think, or are we just committing this year? I mean, we can't really commit future councils to it. So I don't know. This is my sort of slight unease with this. Are we sort of de facto agreeing to the full amount by doing this amount? Again, I don't have any great qualms about the amount for the kind of event it is, and it's a very small portion of their budget, but I think I would might have a harder time with the entirety of the $50,000 for the piece. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Mine were along the same line. I mean, I'm quite fine with putting $10,000 in for this budget. I think this is going to be a phenomenal event that's coming to mainly Oak Bay, and it's going to put a lot of focus from Canada on Oak Bay. So for us to be able to support that in any way, shape, or form, I think would be beneficial for our community, our businesses, and our residents.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have a question for the Games representative? All right. So is there a consensus of how much we put in? Councillor Zelka, please.
Well, I would enthusiastically suggest the $10,000, but I did wanted to share one thing. I happen to have my Tall Ships Victoria shirt on today. It's the closest thing I had to a sports shirt. So, but I didn't realize that we would be talking actually about the Francophone Games. It is difficult organizing any event of this nature, especially 3 years out. And I remember my experience with Tall Ships, where we had to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars years ahead of time. And the most we could look at in terms of the budgets of the various municipalities that were looking for help, similar to this application, was basically on 1-year increments. And as most of you remember, the last festival for Tall Ships had to be canceled because the funds couldn't be raised in the last year. I would hope that wouldn't happen this year, and I do agree with Councillor Murdoch. Essentially, we would probably be looking at a 3-year commitment. I don't know exactly what the totals would be. I know what the ask is, but I don't know what the totals would be since we cannot bind next year's council or the year after that. But from this perspective, from this 2018 budget, I would definitely love to see this initiative have a good push and a good opportunity to survive.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there consensus on, I see nodding at 10,000, yes? No one objection? Okay, we'll put it at 10,000. Thank you very much. Oak Bay Tea Party, I think is a typical ask over the last number of years. 7,000. Anyone wish to take an objection to that? No, thank you. Put that in the budget. 17 we've discussed before, although I don't think that whether or not there was a consensus whether we put it in the budget, knowing It's from surplus. Is there anyone who objects to having it in the budget? Okay. Councillor Murdoch, do you object? Or do you
I
have
guess I would just like
another
some
comment?
discussion as to where the funds are drawn from in that discussion.
Okay. Okay.
Do that now or later, but
Well, I think we've heard where the intention is to draw this from.
Through the chair, the funds have been set aside in reserve, in the bike lane reserve, specifically for this project, but council has full discretion as to the use of those funds.
All right. Why don't we go through and then we'll come back to that? Is that good? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Since we do have $152,000 in a reserve fund that's specifically for bike lanes, I'm sort of sitting here scratching my head wondering why aren't we using those funds for this amount, leaving that other unallocated aspect of 152 in a general reserve fund that we could apply to other things. I do notice that the bike lanes reserve fund can only be used for bike lanes, whereas a general purpose reserve fund, we have full discretion.
Okay, so well, we can make a decision on that when we come back to it. The next one is the Employee Recognition Program, number 18. Oh, okay, Councillor Croft?
Well,
We're gonna come
through
back
you-
to this?
well, no,
Oh,
no.
okay.
My understanding, the 230,000. If I remember the budgeted amount, there's a BC bike grant of about $75,000, which with the 175 gives us our $230,000 in change. So maybe we just need more information about the makeup of this and not debate it here, because it's not clear as to what the makeup of the grant and the reserve fund are.
All right. So let's come back to that. Let's just finish these last three, and then we'll come back, and then we can have that request for information. Employee Recognition Program number 18. There's a request for $1,000. There's already $575 in the budget, so the request is for $425.
I think that's good.
Everyone okay with that? Okay. BC Human Rights Tribunal, $6,000. This is not necessarily, Ms. Carter, all technology, is it?
That's correct, and I'll actually defer to Mr. Jones to speak to this one.
Sorry, Your Worship, yeah, really what this is a request for council to consider providing amplified sound at more of the committee and commission meetings. And with the way our system is, I think everyone realizes that we need to have someone here to actually help us do that. So we have, for example, our Advisory Planning Commission, Parks and Rec Commission, Design Panel, and those meetings don't use amplified sound. So we have received some concerns expressed by residents that it's difficult to follow along in those meetings because they're not mic'd.
Okay. Okay. So it would be more amplification equipment.
No, this would largely be to pay an auxiliary person to be here to actually set it all up.
To use the existing amplification.
Correct.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Anyone have any questions on that? Okay. Councillor Kirby, then Councillor Murdoch, please.
I just was wondering if, I mean, this is not for tonight, but I think perhaps investing in maybe there are other options of technological options that improve. I think we all experience the frustration of these mics and the connections and misconnections, and then we've heard complaints that there's not enough amplification, in the foyer. So when we have large meetings, and so I just think I totally support this. I think it's an excellent investment, but if we can explore options for future that might be an improvement on these mics and the system we have, I think that would be a good thing.
We will certainly be doing that, and you're absolutely right.
Okay. Councillor Murdoch, then, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I guess when I saw this and the fact that it was to be sort of for ongoing, continuous, sort of someone to be around to set up and take down, and it's a bit finicky. Have we explored the option of having a personal amplification device, almost like a speaking trumpet type electronic version of that for people to if someone is in the audience that has a hard time hearing, that they can have something that amplifies the sound for the single person, as opposed to setting all this up, because this is very finicky, and I'm acutely aware of how difficult this might be to set up and tear it down and get people used to using it.
Yeah, we actually did explore as well a hearing loop. So that's a different form, different technology that people that do have hearing devices can utilize. There's a cost to that. I think really I think this would be like a 1 or 2 year solution, because really in a perfect world you would operate these systems very easily. You would come in and you'd flick on a switch and they would work just fine. But that costs a lot of money to put those in place, and it takes a fair amount of research to get the right thing for the space. So that is a piece of work that we want to do, to look at our audio visual for this space, but want to ensure that whatever we put in here is going to be something that maybe, if need be, we could take away. So there's lots of things to consider, and to be honest, it's a big price tag to do that right. You're looking at $30,000 to $50,000 to put something in place.
Any other questions then on this issue? Yeah, go ahead, Councilor.
I guess I appreciate the hearing loop piece, which amplifies to those specific devices. But are there not just some sort of headphones with an amplifying device that you can just hand out to someone if they're in the audience and can't hear? Tom was just Googling some here, but I'm just...
Yeah, I'm not aware.
Okay. I have a problem with sort of funding things this seems very a funny way of addressing the issue of for one complaint, to have to make so many meetings that are here that are not... Anyway, I don't have any great issue. It's not a lot of money, but I think there may be some better ways of tackling it that we should explore.
So with respect to the technology you refer to, you'd still have to have something near the speaker as well as something near the listener.
I don't think I can solve the problem at this table right now.
I think it's a little more complex.
It's fine to put money in the budget for now for this, but I think we need to keep exploring other options on it.
Sounds like that's what's going to be done. So the consensus, we'll put this in there? Yeah, I don't see any objections at this point. Thank you. So $6,000. And next one is removal of derelict boats. This is the amount that, equivalent amount I think you found in the budget this year from other sources, or approximately?
That's correct, Your Worship.
All right. So although it wasn't in the budget last year, that's how much we found in other pieces of the budget to fund the removal. Is there a consensus that we put that money in this year? Yeah, Councillor Murdoch, please.
The only reason I would maybe not, again, it's a small amount of money. It's probably worth doing, because I think we should have a little fund for this. But I do know that working with the folks in Cadboro Bay and doing that work, they still got a fair bit of the money that we gave them available last time in hand. They haven't spent it all, so it's not needed to my knowledge this year. I talked to them recently about whether or not they needed some more money, and they didn't actually reflect needing any more money. So I guess my question is, are we putting money in here on principle in reserve, or are we doing this in response to requests? And I guess that would be probably what's the best approach to doing this.
Your Worship, I know if you haven't got a request, you are going to be getting a request to put the same amount of money in as was spent last year, the $4,000, as is the District of Saanich going to get the same request.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that. That seems appropriate. Thank you.
And I think you're in the loop with a group of, almost like a committee that's working on this?
Your Worship, there's actually the Cadboro Bay Residents Association that has done a remarkable job, to be honest, and brought together people from the province, the Coast Guard, different associations, the Yacht Club, and have got everyone in the same room talking about things that can be done. So there will be some things, and there will be some minor costs. As an example, we're going to put up some signage and that type of thing, and we could use this money for that.
And that's where you get your intelligence, so to speak, that it's going to be a request coming forward? Yep, thank you. So consensus, we leave that in? All righty, thank you very much. Let's just go back now to talk about where we would draw the 230. Is that instructions that you would need, Ms. Carter, as to where to draw that 230,000 for the bike lanes?
Yes, Your Worship. It's currently not in the budget, so if council chooses that they would like it to be in the budget, they should also indicate the funding source for that.
Okay. So the options are all from the surplus, part from the surplus, and some from the reserves. Are there other options? Ms. Carter?
Actually, it would be the 230,000 is sitting in reserve, so it wouldn't necessarily. It's already been allocated from surplus, so it would either be funding from the 230,000 in reserve, or reallocation of that 230,000.
Oh, I see. Okay. So because it was surplus last year, it's gone into the reserves, and then that's where we would draw it from. And so the specific reserve where it should be drawn from, kind of a general reserve versus specific reserve, is the issue before us.
Correct. The funds are currently sitting in the bike lane reserve.
Okay. So you put 230,000 in the bike lane reserves.
Correct.
Okay. And so where else would we draw this from if we didn't draw it from those bike lane reserves?
I believe that is where you would draw it from. The decision would be whether council wants to include it in the budget or not.
Oh, I see. All right. So do we have any questions on that? Councillor Murdoch, then Councillor Zelko, please.
I have two questions. One through you to staff. I apologize. I should have looked this up before tonight, but I didn't. What the budget of the $230,000, is this sort of our share of a larger project cost that is being partially funded by other grants? That was my recollection originally, but I can't remember now where this is sitting at.
Through you, Chair, to be fair, I couldn't quite remember the details too, so I looked it up on my handy phone here. So from the Committee of the Whole in March, when we discussed the bike lanes project, there was a couple of options that really are on the table, and I'll just summarize them for you. There's the detailed design that we presented, which we consider like the baseline cost, which is just the make the bike lanes look like the drawings, which was $156,319. With that design, we had to use that cost and that portion of the project to apply for the Bike BC grant, which would be, if awarded, up to 50% of that baseline cost. Excuse me. To actually do the project, we are required to do, we recommend to do road rehabilitation as well. And there was the two, if you recall in the report from March, there was a table that had two highlighted areas, which were the staff recommended options for the project, which was the baseline design plus partial road rehab with all of the green treatment. So that would be a grand total of 230,000, which is where the number in front of you comes from. And then there was a reduced scope option as well, which is the detailed design as you see, the baseline cost, plus a reduced amount of the MMA conflict zone treatment, which would be conflict zone treatment at Foul Bay Road and Cadboro Bay Road on the north side, and then as well at Cranmore, where the road curves, and so that drivers, as they turn right on Cranmore, have that conflict zone there. And so that would reduce the total cost to, it looks like I might need glasses soon, 155,000 approximately.
Thank you. Councillor Murdoch, any follow-up questions on that?
Sorry, so it's 156,319 plus 230,000 for the rehab. Is that?
No, I'll just go through the math one more time.
No, it's okay. So the other one with reduced green was 155,000. That would be essentially the two options. One.
That's right. Grand total for the baseline plus the full green treatment was 230 total, and then the reduced scope was 156 total.
Okay, and the Bike BC grant was only pay 50% of the baseline 156.
That's correct. They wouldn't cover an eligible expense if use that a term was not a road surface rehabilitation. It was all they would fund if they award the grant, actual bike lane construction, if that makes sense.
Okay, so we'd be looking at theoretically upwards of, or as little as $78,000 for the half of the baseline, plus the $55,000 or so to bring it up to the implementation.
That's correct.
Okay, so so we're looking at it probably closer to 125,000, 140,000, depending on what kind of grants we actually get from Bike BC. Is that a fair? I guess we don't know if we're going to get anything.
Through the chair, that's correct. We have no indication of whether we should expect or we've applied and we're waiting for the granting organization to review the applications and give us feedback when they're ready.
And so the last question. So through you, Chair, are we funding this on condition of getting that grant, or are we funding this full steam ahead whether or not we get the grant? Because my comfort level is if we get the grant, but not necessarily if we don't get the grant.
Through the chair, so if we are funding it based on the grant, it should be included in the budget. If we don't get the grant, then it won't be spent.
So is that the understanding that it would only go forward if we get the grant?
That would be council's decision.
Okay. Okay. I mean, that's my comfort level with this, although I'd certainly like to see the project done, but that's a lot of money, the $75,000 available to us. Thank you. And in regards to the funding in the reserves, I grant that where the reserve comes from probably isn't the most important piece, but my preference on this, because we have other costs that we are going to consider here at the end of the night tonight in terms of other, more money into projects for money towards other infrastructure and so forth. So I guess all those things have to sort of come together in terms of where they're at. I don't have a problem with the money here. I think, especially if it's contingent upon that, it ends up being closer to $80,000 or $180,000 in there, and so $150,000, something like that. So I would feel comfortable with that, and actually we can pay for that out of the existing bike lane reserve, which is also very positive.
Thank you. I think in the past we have made projects conditional, that we would only proceed if there were grants. So that is certainly one option we can look at. Councillor Zelka, then Kirby, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. Just wanted to clarify through you to Director of Finance. The funds that were in, or the original funds in the bike lane reserve fund, the $152K, I understand that is dedicated to bike lanes and there's no discretion on those funds.
Through the chair, those are not statutory reserves, so there are options for council should they choose to redirect.
Oh, thank you. And then I also heard you say that there's another, or not necessarily another 230, but a total of 230,000 from reserves separate from this 152 that could be used to, that are currently in some sort of a reserve fund that we have full discretion for, that could be used to pay for this project.
That's correct. There is an additional 230,000 that was set aside on the balance sheet so that it didn't fall to the bottom line surplus. That would allow council options going forward.
Excellent, thank you. So I was very pleased to receive an email, as all councillors did, from you earlier on today, indicating that as of October 2018, we are free to start paying down our long-term debt. And that rather excited me. And as a result of that, I'm rather keen to find, later on tonight, unallocated reserve funds that we could possibly put down on our long-term debt. So when I hear funds such as this, it sounds like the 230 is essentially we have full discretion on, plus this 152 we have essentially full discretion on. So it sounds like it doesn't really matter if we go ahead with this project where we pay it from, because later on, if we talk about paying down long-term debt, we could take it from the existing bike lanes fund, should we choose.
Through the chair, that's correct. And in terms of paying down the debt, we have certain intervals that we are able to pay down the debt. So, for example, our long-term debt is over a 20-year term. After the first 10-year term, you have an option to pay down additional funds. And then following that, after another 5 years, you can put down additional funds again.
Excellent. And if I'm just quoting from your email, as of 2018, we can pay down either part or all of the, and you describe it as the long-term debt. And then you have there's a paying down additional funds on monthly payment dates for the short-term funds. But in particular, I'm looking at the long-term debt. That's something that excited me. So I'm definitely be interested in supporting this project, assuming, of course, we get the grant. So if it's conditional on the receiving of the BC Bike Grant, I would love to see this move forward. Thank you.
Councillor Kirby, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would not like to see this become conditional on other grant funding. I think that puts the project at risk, and that would be very unfortunate. That in my 7 years on council, we haven't seen a single meter extension of bike lane in this community, and I think this is the first project and the best place for this first project, right in front of the high school, that has and has had to add to their bike racks dramatically this year because of the number of kids riding to school. And I think when we invest in infrastructure right in front of the school, it will improve safety for all of those students that are not being driven to school, that are getting to school through an active mode, reducing emissions, reducing noise and congestion on our streets, reducing traffic issues around the school, as well as the wear and tear on the street. I also want to remind Council that this budget includes a large amount of road rehab, and I could ask for clarification on exactly how much that costs, but those are, if delayed, those repairs will become more expensive. So I think this is, while we're talking about $230,000 for a bike lane, the actual cost of the bike lane, as mentioned earlier, is much smaller than one might understand from the description. It's truly the rehab of the street that needs to take place, whether or not we fund it now or later. And so, you know, we're not making a decision about bike lanes which is political. This is a decision about investing in our infrastructure and adding some incentive for kids to ride their bikes and do so safely. I also think that we had a very passionate and inspiring presentation earlier this evening that will be the extension of this project. And it will be that extension that will allow even younger kids to ride safely and even further stretch on our streets. I think it's this project's a kilometer, and we might see a second kilometer added, which would be an incredible incentive to the youth in this community to switch their modes, which we all should be doing if we can, and trying to reduce our CO2 and GHG emissions. So I think this is very important that we fund the entire amount, and I'm so grateful to Ms. Carter for finding the funds in the surplus from last year to make it an easy decision for me, and that I think we need to leave the remaining funds in the bike lane reserves intact for the future, for the extension of this bike lane up Cadboro Bay Road to Willows School, where they have asked for a separated lane, which will be far safer, but also much more expensive. And so we need to leave those reserve funds alone and set them aside for a much bigger and more, to my mind, more important project, because the younger the rider, the more vulnerable they are.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Thank you. I think that we can all be in agreement, it sounds like, that this is a very important project. I too would like to see us make this conditional on getting the grant, but I would like to see us use the money that's in the reserve fund already for this, and use that $230,000 from surplus to something else that's important within our community. So I'm very supportive of the bike lanes, but would like to see the money come out of the bike lane reserve funds and conditional on the grant.
Okay, so I think the first decision that we have to make is whether or not this should be a conditional item in our budget. In other words, do we only go ahead with this project if there is a grant provided? I think that's the first that we need to discuss. Yes.
Your Worship.
I was going to say Councillor Jones, but
yeah, I know I talked too much. Sorry.
It's Shamrock Jones
yes.
tonight.
One of the things you need to consider is we may apply for a $75,000 grant, but the granting agency could give us anything. It could be 25,000, it could be 50,000, it could be the full 75,000. So we would need, if you are going to make this conditional, we would need to get a sense of what level of grant you would be expecting us to receive.
Okay, so let's decide the big issue first. Should it be conditional or shouldn't? Then if we decide it should be conditional how much the grant. I think that's a good point. So, Councillor Ney.
Through you, Chair, I just have a couple of questions before making this decision, if I may. So, staff, then what I'd like to understand first is this funding source. If we were not successful this year, is the funding source still available to apply for in subsequent years? That's the first question.
Through you, Chair, I believe so. I think just in my short time in the municipality, there was a Bike BC opportunity just over a year ago, but we didn't have a shelf-ready project ready to go, and then there was this round. So I believe they're periodic, and don't have the full story when the next round would be, but I believe they come periodically.
So like annually would be your guess?
I'll have to check. I can
like
check
that,
for sure.
But not every 5 years or something, but sort of more annually or
I believe so.
biannually?
I'll
Okay.
have to check for sure.
Okay. And the other thing is, this number, this cost was estimated in 2017, I guess, based on the proposal. And based on, I mean, I don't expect a detailed number, but how much are costs going up? So, for example, if it was delayed a year, how much increase in costs might we anticipate in another year or 2 years? What kind of trending is going on around those kinds of construction costs? Significant or
so through you, Chair, the changes in costs in terms of the estimates several months ago versus now is just now that we have a finalized detailed design and up-to-date numbers. But as long as we don't go out too far, like if we're talking about a year or so change, there shouldn't be too much change in the estimated costs. I don't want to one day regret saying that out loud, but I think that that's the case. It's a bit different when we talk about construction costs that have to do with concrete and asphalt and other materials, where there can be some significant variation year to year. But in this case, it's unlikely to change significantly.
I can't remember who was next, Kirby or Braithwaite? Kirby, and then Braithwaite.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just referring to the report from the March 19th Cadboro Bay Bike Lane, Foul Bay to Bowker Avenue report that the addenda that was provided by, the report that was provided by the Director of Engineering to the Committee of the Whole. And I just wanted to remind staff, or remind council that this is the road resurfacing is a substantial portion of this budget, and that the actual bike lane cost is quite minimal by comparison, and so Bike BC, $75,000 would be, we were successful the first time we did any kind of infrastructure improvements for biking, which was the Foul Bay Road at Lansdowne crossing, which was a very minor project. I know that, we haven't done very much, so we may be successful, and that is a fairly reasonable sum to expect, I think. But I don't know that that we can count on that, and I just really feel that making this conditional really sends a strong message to our community that we don't prioritize projects like this. That after 7 years, like I said, we really haven't done anything to improve our bike lanes, and we still have the only part-time bike lane probably anywhere. And so this is a very minor investment for a really incredible return. So I cannot support it being conditional.
Okay. Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you, Chair. I think that I totally hear what you're saying, Councillor Kirby. But where my mind goes on this is that we do have that $152 or $157,000 in our bike reserve fund. And that would cover, from what I understand, the better part or the most part of this project, even without a grant coming. And if we went to the, without the base, the green paint on the whole, on a larger area, correct? So to me, I mean, if that's the case, then I'm fine with not having it conditional on the grant if all of the money comes out of the bike reserve fund. And then we, as council, at our discretion, can then choose at another time to put more money from surplus right back into that bike reserve fund, just as we're doing now. Because basically, in essence, what we're doing is taking $230,000 from reserves or surplus and putting it into a bike reserve fund. So we could do that next year. We could do that the year after. We could do that the year after that. So I'm okay if it all comes from the bike reserve fund rather than having to wait for the making it conditional on the grant.
Okay. So, Councillor Murdoch again, please.
I haven't spoken to this yet. The question here is whether or not to make it conditional on a grant, and I think we have to. I think that we don't have access to grants for many of our road and infrastructure costs. Most of them do not qualify for grants, the resurfacing and the needs. We are currently at, in 2013 dollars, we had a $2.3 million resurfacing budget just to keep up, and we are currently a little less than, well, we're at $450,000 of that. We're way behind. We're $2.4 million behind what we actually have to spend on a year-over-year basis. We can't get grants for that. I think we have to recognize that where we can use grants, we have to. This is a little over 1/3% of our taxes that we can get from other bodies to help do this. The resurfacing will form part of that. But, I would point out that the other parts of that road are used by all modes of transportation as well. And frankly, as one who rides my bike around a lot, some of those potholes are getting pretty scary and on some of those streets. So I think we need to start spending money more on our roads as a whole, including this. I hear exactly what you're saying in terms of the frustration of getting it done. But I feel quite confident that we will get a grant for this portion and that we will get it done, and it'll just form part of our piece, and we can dedicate the money that we have to spend from the budget that we have to pay out of pocket. So I think we have to be very wise in how we're spending our money here. We can't just, where we have grants available, and they're very few and far between on our roads, we should be taking advantage of it.
Thank you. I'm just going to say something before I call on you, then Councillor Ney, because the question is going to be, do we have it in conditional or not conditional? I think that's going to be the show of hands. I'm not in favor of making it conditional. I am in favor of supporting our strategic plan, which doesn't talk about it being conditional. So you may recall, so I have a number of reasons why I don't think it should be conditional. Mr. Jones started off by saying we were a great council because we had strategic plans, and not only that, we funded them. And when I look at the strategic plan, it says in 2018 we will determine design and construction bike lanes on Cadboro Bay Avenue between Bowker and Foul Bay. It doesn't say it's conditional on it being funded. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we do have a complete streets policy that we've adopted some years ago, and that talks about a hierarchy of transportation. And I think this fits well within that we actually proceed with the bike lane project. And thirdly, I think that we should proceed without conditions, is what we heard from our junior engineers tonight. They looked at another part of Cadboro Bay, and they came to the conclusion that bike lane were important for the safety and encouragement of people getting on their bikes. And I mean, what are the old saying, out of the mouth of babes, but we've heard that from other sources. We know that. We know that some of us were actually talking about Gil Penaluzza, who has a foundation out of Toronto that's called 88, and that is designing bike lanes, bike infrastructure, that you would be confident if your grandmother or grandfather of 80 biked on, you'd be confident that they could be safe, or your 8-year-old child. So I think there's lots of good reasons why we should proceed with this. And if we are confident that we're going to get this grant, then there shouldn't be a problem with that either. So I'm certainly going to support going ahead with this. And also, if there's a fourth reason it needed to be part of this is general road safety. Councillor Ney, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In addition to what you've just stated, what I would add, that we've already said that we would do it. That's certainly so. But the other logical, I mean, I do appreciate what Councillor Murdoch said. We need to be wise with our money. But we also have a bike lane that's being proposed adjacent to a school with 1,400 young people, where there's bikes, flooding outside of the property line, and it appears an increased uptake in bike use. I mean, there couldn't be a more appropriate place to put this. I'm not suggesting for a minute that, there's councillors here are disagreeing with it, but it's a priority that we have committed to. But the other piece is the logic of, if we don't get a grant, we don't do it. Well, let's say we didn't get, I'm confident we will, I'm hopeful we'll get it, but I have no idea what the odds would be. But what if we didn't get it the next year? And it would be left for another council, or the year after that? Do we just keep going on until we say we're going to get a grant and then we'll fund it? We said we'd do this. We've got the money here that's taken from surplus and reserve here. And we need to do it. This is the right place to do it. Let's get on with the job. It doesn't make sense at all to me to keep waiting, for a point in time when we don't know for certain that we'd be get some grant money for this.
Okay, I think we've all had a say. Show of hands of who wants to proceed and put this in the budget without any conditions. So it's going to go ahead at 230 in the budget, regardless of whether or not we get a grant. Okay, now the next thing, Ms. Carter, do we have to decide which particular
Excuse
reserve?
me, Chair, sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I have one question on that. I think that, I thought we were just talking about whether or not we should make it conditional or not. I would like to say, then I would prefer to take the money out of the bike lane reserve fund, not out of this $230,000. So
I think that's the, I think that's the second question I was about to get to. So the first question is, it's not going to be, funding of this project will not be conditional.
Right, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So we're all agreed there?
Okay.
Well, we're not all agreed, but the majority's agreed. That's democracy. And so the next is where it should come out of. Okay? And what are our options, Ms. Carter?
Your Worship, the options are that it be funded from the bike reserve, whether it be the 150 some odd thousand versus the 230,000.
So it's the same reserve, and it's got enough money in it to cover this. So is that what you're saying? I just want to make sure.
That's correct. Okay. And then if the 230 is not used, then council should decide where they would like to allocate that $230,000.
All right. Councillor Croft.
So I'm hearing that we
You
have...
look puzzled again.
Well, I am puzzled because it sounds like we have two bike reserve accounts, one for about $150,000, one for $230,000. One paid out of surplus funds and one put aside a number of years ago to create a bike fund. And that's my correct understanding. So we actually have $380,000 in a bike reserve fund.
Through the chair, that's correct. It's all a single bike lane reserve. When the funds were set aside from surplus, it was added to the existing bike lane reserve, just as a holding spot.
And just to be clear, that the reason we haven't seen that is because we haven't seen the year-end financial statements.
That's correct.
All right. So it's going to come out of that reserve. The question is, will the balance, the unused balance, does council want to give directions, and hopefully I'm articulating this right, once the project is finished, council will have the option to direct the unused portion of that reserve fund into another reserve fund. Is that correct, Ms. Carter?
Yes, Your Worship, that's correct.
So the question is, do we do that tonight, or do we wait until we see if we get the grant? Can we do it at any time, or do we wait until the project's finished? Maybe someone comes forward with a super screaming hot deal to do all of this for $50,000. So there's all kinds of contingencies. Can we wait to do this until, one, we see if we get the money from our grant, two, we'll see the actual cost, and three, the completion of the project?
Yes, you can make that decision anytime, and we would amend the budget once that decision has been made.
Okay. Tom Croft.
Well,
Excuse me, Councillor Croft.
So through you, Chair, I don't think that we, just like we shouldn't speculate on getting a grant, we shouldn't speculate where we might put the money in the future, and I think we should wait till this project is finished to decide where that money goes.
Is there consensus on that?
Well,
Councillor
actually,
Braithwaite?
not necessarily. I think that we still have a portion of this budget to go through, and there could be a place that we want to allocate $200,000 further on in the budget, and maybe we want to do that tonight. So I would say that it might be done tonight and not in the future.
All right. So do you want to have that? No, Councillor Murdoch, and then we can decide whether or not we want to have that discussion in this budget, or do we want to wait till all these other pieces have fallen into place? And I guess the question is, what difference would it make? Let's start with that. What difference would it make deciding now versus later?
The only difference is whether or not it's included in the budget now or an amended budget later. The reserve will still sit there until it's allocated.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Murdoch.
So I guess what I'd like to get to the conversation of, I think this is the details of when doesn't matter that much to me. The allocation of the surplus into the bike lane without sort of having that discussion as a council table, I think needs to happen. I think I don't have a problem with actually putting some of this money in there, using some of the money that's there now, but we haven't yet got sort of a total of what the tax increase is. We haven't got to the recommended 1% additional to go into extra reserves to help cover other infrastructure costs, and we haven't sort of had a broader discussion about anything else from a priority perspective that we're looking at funds for. And I think that's the conversation where we need to actually have the reserve question is, okay, so we have 150,000 here. If we're going to allocate another 80,000 of that to cover the 230, maybe we put 80,000 or 100,000 or 150,000 into bike lane reserve fund to keep that topped up a little bit, but also spend some of that money on other aspects. And I think that's the question I would like to get to, is actually where we're spending that money. And I don't know if that 230,000 is the entirety of the money that we have as a surplus that we're allowed to touch at this point, but I just looking at where we have significant shortfalls in our infrastructure, there seems to me that there's other aspects of things rather than putting in reserves that we might be spending it because we're sort of paying an interest rate by not doing some of the work. So that's the question I want to get to, Chair. So I don't know how we're going to get there. If you want to do that after we should have done a summary at the end, but we need to talk about the recommended 1%. We need to talk about the impact on the taxes, and we need to talk about other aspects of our infrastructure that we might want to tackle.
Okay, so what's the consensus of council? Should we, and Ms. Carter, from your point of view, would it be simpler just to put this down the road a little bit later in the meeting when we get to that point, and we can kind of see it in a greater context?
Yes, Your Worship, that would be probably the best.
All right. So we'll put a bookmark in there. We won't leave tonight until we've come back to it. There's 3 other changes that Ms. Carter has drawn to my attention. And before I have another add-on, okay, let's deal with the 3, Ms. Carter, that needs to change in the budget because of a variety of reasons.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we began at 3.23% increase. Then we were advised at the Parks, Recreation and Culture Estimates Committee meeting that there was $25,000 for urban forest strategy that was omitted from that number. So we've added that here. We've also added from the last Estimates Committee meeting, we received new information regarding the GVLRA fees to the district, and we had a bit of a shortfall there, so we've added 4,387. And then as well, there was a question at the last estimates meeting regarding deer control and the grant that we receive and the matching portion of that. So we needed to add another 20,000 to the deer control expense in order to match that grant.
Okay. Are there any questions on those 3 issues? Okay. Right. So we'll add those. There's consensus. We add those, and really we certainly don't have a choice on the. Well, we do have a choice in the urban forest strategy, but I think we're all in a consensus. We want to proceed with that. GVLRA, that's really out of our control, and I think we've made a commitment on deer control. So that's going to go in, yes? Okay. Thank you. My additional suggestion to council is that we add 7,500 for the creation and design and creation of pins for our volunteers. As you know, a number of years ago, we started down we created a project called the Honor of the Oak Leaf, an honor that's given to anyone who sat on a committee, a board, or a commission, the CBCs, and those are the same people we invite to municipal dinner, plus others at the municipal dinner. And this is a small way for us to thank our volunteers and to recognize them. Their names go into a large calligraphy book that's still in the preparation stage and will be in display from time to time in the municipal hall. What we've used in the past for these pins are kind of off-the-shelf pins, but I think the time has come now that we should design very specific ones that just for Oak Bay. So I'm going to suggest 7,500 go in for the design and manufacture of those. We give them out usually per term of council. This 7,500 should cover probably about 250 approximately pins plus the design. Typically at the end of council's term is when they're given out to the people who've served the 4 years before. You're only entitled to 1, even though you might have a whole bunch of different boards. So I suggest that goes in. How is there a consensus that can go in at 7,500? Yes, Councillor Zelko.
A question, if I may, please, through you to whomever can answer. The current pins, I presume there's a budget for the current pins, and in terms of what's been distributed so far, how much, say, 250 of the current pins would cost?
Minimal, because I wouldn't call them, you can get them from any store that makes these kind of things. So it's been a minimal cost, and I think over the years it's probably lumped in with our other coat of arms pins. So it really hasn't been a specific line item that I can ever remember. It's been like that. These pins were actually used many years ago, the kind of off-the-shelf pins, to recognize people who made donations to the library of over a certain amount. So they've been in use probably for 15 years. But again, you could go to any pin manufacturer, any trophy shop, and pick up a handful of these. They're not special. I mean, the way we give them out are special, and the way you recognize people are special. But my view was it's time to have a little more designer pin that only we use and only for this purpose. So. Any objection to that going in? No? Okay. 7,500. Thank you. You're good?
I'll raise an objection to it. I think the current pins are fine. I don't have a problem with them. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else of that view? Yes,
Well,
Councillor Croft?
I sort of the same bent too. There's lots of pins out in the market that one can buy off the shelf that are quite nice. It's the intent, not the pin. I also think that that's quite a bit of money to be putting aside. And then if you're going to go down that road, then I think you should involve the community in some sort of an RFP, some sort of outreach, that sort of thing, so that they get involved, they take ownership of the pin, that we just don't go up to some designer and say, hey, Mr. Designer, make me a pin, and then we agree on it. I think it could be a great opportunity for community engagement.
Okay. Any others? How do we feel?
I would echo those comments that if it were a local artist or some kind of community building opportunity where we are envisioning something or creating something that's helps the community reflect on what makes Oak Bay, what makes us special, what makes us unique, what makes us feel connected to one another, that might persuade me that this is a wise investment. And also if it were being invested in a local artist, and that would also reassure me that's us investing in a small art project, and contributing to that economy. But if it's, as you said, some designer project, then maybe then I wouldn't feel as comfortable. It feels like buying jewelry for, it doesn't feel appropriate.
In the 7,500, if we put it in, doesn't preclude that? Doesn't preclude putting out an RFP and a request for a local artist to come forward and paying that local artist for the design, as opposed to paying a jeweler.
I think I'd feel far more comfortable if that were a part of it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I concur with what Councillor Kirby and Croft have said. That makes sense to me.
So
Make it a community building identity initiative.
So if we were to put it in the budget, it would be conditional on the process coming forward to be approved by council in terms of how we get to the design?
My only concern is that that's an additional bit of workload that isn't in our strategic priorities, and that that will be time consuming, and also another project for staff to manage. So I'm reluctant to go there because I don't see that. I think we've got quite an extensive list already that we haven't been able to achieve. So yeah, I'm reluctant.
Okay. Okay, I don't see a groundswell of support, so that's fine. So we'll put that off to another day. Okay.
Just a comment about, because workload's always an issue, but I mean, I'm just wondering if it's something that could be sort of referred to a community group to, yeah.
If it could be referred to the Public Art Advisory Committee, maybe that might be a better way of determining how much it might cost, and asking for a report, perhaps from the Public Art Advisory Committee.
And then looking for funding sources, perhaps from
other granting
other
agencies.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that might be a good project for the coming year for the Public Art Advisory Committee.
Okay, so we'll leave it off for now, then I'll bring it back in that context. Good, thank you. Now we're back at giving you direction, Ms. Carter, which would include things like that we've looked at just now in terms of a few minutes ago about what surplus and the reserve funds. Can you kind of give us and then I've heard a 1% suggestion over here. Can you give us kind of a list of the directions that you would need and on what specific topics?
Thank you, Your Worship. So, based on the discussion so far, we're currently sitting at a 4.14% overall tax levy increase. That, of course, would be less for an average homeowner based on the new construction. So the direction that would be required from council would be whether or not there are changes required to the budget that's before you and what is to be funded. So for example, Cadboro Bay bike lanes, if it's to be funded, and if so, from where, and the allocation of that amount of reserve. As well, I should also point out that the additional 1% for infrastructure renewal is not currently in the budget. Last year, Council decided to redirect the gas tax funds into the Infrastructure Renewal Fund as opposed to the Uplands Reserve in the Capital Works Fund. And I also need to point out just something, there's a bit of a change in accounting rules for that. So the gas tax money that's going to Infrastructure Renewal Reserve now has to be recognized in the year. The full amount of the gas tax money has to be recognized in the year that it's received, even though the expenditure doesn't happen until down the road. So the net effect is nothing. We're still treating it the same way, but you may notice that difference on the financial statements that come forward from the auditors.
Just on that point, does that change anything about our budgeting, what we're doing tonight?
No, it does not.
Okay. So one that you've identified is the surplus, and two is the 1% not currently in the budget. Were there other items that were identified by other council members that we needed to give direction on? Oh, sorry, first of all, were those were the two items that we should give you direction on?
That's correct. Those are the high-level items.
All right, thank you. Yes, go ahead, Councillor Zelko.
I believe there was also some discussion on maybe some ways and means on paying down long-term debt. The ideas that were raised. In particular, I think if I remember correctly, the money that we still owe, for example, for the Parks and Rec, $255,000, if I remember correctly, but I may be a bit wrong on that. But something in that area. I don't think we can pay it all down this year, but I do notice those numbers seem awfully familiar.
Okay,
Similar.
so that's another topic head. Ms. Carter, what kind of instructions would you need for that, and what kind of information would you have available to tell us whether or not that's something that would save us money, and what the overall impact of paying that down would be?
I'm sorry, Your Worship. Could I ask you to repeat that?
So the suggestion is made that we consider long-term debt pay down, correct?
I may have misspoken. What I was more referring to was the highest interest debt, which I'm assuming is the long-term debt, but that assumption may be wrong.
Okay. Is there two kinds of debts, high interest and low interest?
Your Worship, there are different interest rates for each of the different loans, and I don't have that information currently in front of me, but I can tell you that through MFA, we should be getting something shortly. They give us about 6 months' notice when we have the opportunity to pay down debt, so I expect something coming from them shortly because our payment would have to be made in October.
Okay. Is that something we need to decide tonight, or can we wait till we get those figures and to make a decision on paying that down? And do we have enough information as to the net effect of paying it down? In other words, it's cheaper to pay it down in the long run, and if so, how much do we save?
Your Worship, we would be saving the interest, so we would have to do that analysis to determine how much that is versus how much interest we would be receiving if the funds were left in our accounts.
Okay. And do we need to do it in advance of October as part of this budget process?
It doesn't have to be done as part of this budget process. However, we will have a short window of time that we will have to advise MFA, which is approximately 6 months before the October date.
Six months before the October date. Okay. Okay. So there's a question as to whether or not we want to have that as a separate debate. But we could have that separate debate in May, as an example.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Murdoch, is there anything else on that list that that we need to discuss?
I'd just like to have a conversation about roads as well.
Okay. Does that come under the 1% extra?
Pavement management system model. No, we've started a number of years ago, 3 years ago, where we had the 2013 report. 2014, 2015, and 2016, we increased the amount of money each year from $250 to $350 to $450,000. Last year, we did not continue that increase, and we're still $2 million shy of where we were in 2013 trying to get to. So I think there's a consideration there to keep increasing that number to try and get up to maintenance rates.
Okay. So I've captured 4 issues. I hope I've 1% currently not in the budget. Long-term debt issue, which looks like we can wait till May to do. The surplus, which we discussed before, and now the pavement management.
If I may, Chair?
Is there a 5th one?
Well, no, but the details of the debt reduction aspect might be in May, but the allocation of the funds to some sort of a debt reduction reserve could be today. Thank you.
All right, but it doesn't sound like we have sufficient information to make that determination today in terms of the relative interest rates and the savings. Okay. So, yeah, I'm just kind of puzzled as how we might make a decision without the information. Ms. Carter, can you help us on that?
We would have to bring that information back to another meeting.
All right. So we're satisfied that we could bring that back to another meeting as opposed to making decisions tonight? Councillor Zelka, you're okay?
As long as we have available reserve funds, yes.
Okay. So is that the consensus of council that we ask staff to bring back information about the effect of long-term debt paydowns? Right? Yep. Councillor Croft.
I have a question on this through you to Councillor Zelka. Are you talking about establishing a reserve fund today for long-term debt paydown as opposed to actually finding out what the numbers are? It seems like you're posing two different questions, and I just want to be sure that we're dealing with, because I know the issue of long-term debt reserve has come up in the past. What would that look like, and what would we need to do? And do we establish a reserve now out of our general reserve funds to do that, or however you do? I'm just wondering if that is your question.
If I may, Chair, answer the direct question from my colleague. While I have a desire maybe for a long-term view, and not today, to consider a debt reduction reserve fund, what I'm more interested in today is the idea that was placed in my mind by the email received today from the Director of Finance relating to the fact that what's new information for me is that as of October 2018, we can pay down long-term debt. I didn't know that until that email arrived today. So it feels more, in terms of what I'm talking about today, as more of a one-time opportunity. I'm also noting that when we went through the funds for the Parks and Rec, that we are still paying off long-term debt for the building of the Parks and Rec building. If I remember correctly, was that renovations? Yes, and it seems that we have enough reserve funds lying around that a one-time payment would actually potentially provide some benefits. But I look forward to a more detailed discussion on that. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna defer that. Is there any other? We have a consensus. We'll defer that.
I don't mind deferring it, but I think the genesis for this was in that slide originally, and I can't find it now in my line items. But as I recall, in those numbers, the interest portion of the long-term debt was around $113,000, So as a percentage of the loan, it was very high. And I'm assuming that was probably because it was based on the larger amount at the beginning, and that's probably a significant area that, obviously if we can pay that down, that's a few $100,000. We're not going to be making that kind of interest coming back. So that was the genesis for it. So I think it might be quite significant in terms of those numbers, if it's possible, if that part of it is possible to borrow to pay down.
Okay, and that's something that we'll get a report back as soon as time permits, and so we don't miss that window of opportunity. Okay, so that's deferred. Okay, so now we're down to 3. Shall we deal with the pavement management one first? That's probably simpler. And is there a suggestion about how we might change the budget in order to do that?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I had some thoughts on this in terms of we are decidedly not keeping up on our paving, and it's one of the few areas that we can actually allocate money to and have direct response. So if I'm looking at ways of spending money and not, we have a fair bit of work to do in terms of reserves and funding larger projects, but in terms of actually helping to, the problem is that the farther we get behind on this, the more expensive it gets. So as roads deteriorate, we can't, that number to keep up was to keep milling and filling and preventing degradation of roads. We're not doing that. So the amount of roads that have gotten past the point of being able to just being topped now or have to be majorly replaced keeps going up. And so we're paying a very, very high penalty for not doing that work. So we stopped increasing it last year, which is a problem with one of the problems I had with the budget last year. And right now, this budget again continues to not increase that number. We're at $450,000 out of what was in 2013 a $2.8 million requirement to keep up. So, yeah, I think there's a couple of things here that I would like to see.
Okay. Can you maybe some concrete suggestions?
Sure, and I guess I would take a little bit of this, flips back again to how we allocate some of the surplus. We've typically not allocated surpluses from the current year into the budget. So it's a little bit unusual to try and take the $230,000 as a surplus and move it into a reserve and then spend it. So I guess I would look at that maybe as, again, the same logic as of wanting to seek grants and so forth is tackling the things that cost us the most money not to do. So I would look at we can't afford to have significant tax raises, but if we're looking at a 1% infrastructure, looking at a total of 1.5%, 1 to 1.5% of taxes going into that, of which, if I'm looking at that, if we say there's a $230,000 surplus, if we're paying, say we take the $150,000 out of the bike lane infrastructure, which is there for, we take that 230 and we sort of split it, so we put $115,000 back into the bike lane reserve. We take $115,000 and we put that towards getting on top of some of the roads, which is about the amount that we would normally increase it. And I would also suggest we add a little bit more on top of that. But I think that would probably be the way I would allocate that.
Okay, so what's that amount on top of that? Just so we have something concrete to focus on. So the first idea is to take $115,000 out of the bike lane reserve fund. And
no, my suggestion would be to take out of the $230,000 that we've allocated, take $150,000 of that out of the bike lane reserve funds.
150.
That's just what we have in there right now, $152,000 and change.
Okay.
So take $150,000 of that, the other $80,000 out of the surplus, and then I guess the other balance of that would be $35,000 of the half of the surplus to go into the bike lanes, so back into reserves, and then take the other half of the $230,000, $115,000, and put that in towards actually paying for paving some roads this year.
Okay. I didn't capture all of those numbers. Did you, Ms. Carter?
Sorry, I would need some clarity on that.
Sure. To make it more clear, if we're counting on a $230,000 surplus that we have available to us to spend this year, take half of it towards paving and half of it towards the bike lanes. So we have $150,000 in the bike lanes now, spend that, and the other $115,000 goes in there, and we spend the balance from that amount. It leaves us about, $35,000 or $40,000 in the bike lane reserve, assuming there's no grants. If we get grants, then that would stay in the bike lane reserves. but take the other half and actually pay for some paving.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions. So I think we need to get this all straight in our mind because there was a lot of numbers floating around. Firstly, it wouldn't impair our ability to do the 230,000 project, correct, Ms. Carter? Yeah, that's
correct.
the first one. And so, and you've got the numbers to put into paving, correct?
Correct.
The next question is for Mr. Haran. Do you have the capacity to use that money?
Chair, this is one of those contracts where once we get into contract with the contractor, it's a very short period of time that we do it in the summer. So it just basically means we would change the scope, so it doesn't require additional staff effort to deal with the increase in scope.
So the answer is yes. You can spend it.
Yes.
Good, because there's no use giving it to you if you can't spend it. You don't have enough capacity. So that's good. So we got them both. So, Ms. Carter.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just need to jump in here at this point and advise Council that the allocation of $115,000 would be one-time funds only. So next year we would be back to the base funding level.
Okay.
That would be the second part of my suggestion of that, is to also add the $100,000 operationally. So our annual year-over-year goes from $450,000 to $550,000.
Okay. So let's just get, because there's movement from here to there. Would it be simpler just to do you have a bottom line figure for us that we would spend, Ms. Carter? Because you have not only a computer there, but probably a calculator.
Sorry, that we would spend on...
I would allocate on the pavement management, regardless of where it's from for a minute.
Yes, it would be the $450 that's currently in the budget plus the $115.
$450 in the budget plus $115.
So $565.
Okay. So now we know. And how it comes into surplus is something I think you heard that can happen. Okay.
I think there's something important though, is that that 115 is coming out of the surplus of this year, i.e. out of reserves. So we still need to, in my mind, add the $100,000 to the budget for the extra $100,000 towards the pavement management. So it would really be a total this year with the extra bump up of 115 of whatever that is, 550 plus 665. With 100,000 coming from taxes and 115,000 coming from reserve.
Okay, plus the existing 450. Okay, so we would bump up taxes 100 on this. We would take 115 from surplus, and then we already have approved notionally, or although not finally, the 450. All right. Okay, we're all on the same figures. Okay. And we've gotten Mr. Haran saying that that's a doable. Now, does anyone have any objection to that approach? No objections. All right. So that adds a 100,000 to our taxes. Okay. Right.
That's right.
Okay. Now. So that takes care. Is there any more on the pavement management issue? No. Okay.
If I may.
Yep.
I mean, there is an argument to be made for doing more than that.
But your suggestion wasn't at this point to do more.
Well, I would just throw it out there to anybody else. I mean, we're tackling this. The increase of $100,000 a year is probably not even keeping up to where we were in 2013 at this point, even increasing at that. But
does anyone want to suggest it go higher? Okay, no one's suggesting it. Do you have a question?
I
Councillor
do.
Kirby, please.
I do. So this addition of $100,000 is beyond the 1% recommendation that we had of an increase for asset management?
That's a separate issue. So
Okay.
I had 4 issues.
I'm just
Yep.
clarifying whether
Yep.
this is beyond the 1%.
Yep.
In addition to the 1%. And do we include the $60,000 that is for road rehab? Are we including that as part of the pavement management?
That's in the budget already, I think.
That's part of the $230,000 estimated for the bike lanes, which are actually $150,000, right? So
that's already taken care of.
It's interesting that we call this pavement management because it doesn't include the complete streets application, right? But we have to apply complete streets. So it's interesting how we label things, whether it's paving and it's for cars, but we're under a complete streets policy, so therefore it should be for all road users. And yet, we're just talking about, we had great debate over whether or not to fund pavement management for the high school street.
Yeah, I think we've already decided that.
I know, but it's interesting that that's how it's divided, and it's just how you talk about it, which makes it political.
All right, I hear you. I think now we're still on the pavement management issue.
Yeah, I'm on the
Councillor
pavement management issue because we have now created an infrastructure renewal plan, but we have no policy around how those funds are going to be used in the future. Is that correct?
That is correct, although the funding for that reserve fund comes from gas tax, and the gas tax does have criteria around it.
Yeah, so again, rather than increasing our taxes by $100,000, we could take $100,000 to that infrastructure renewal fund, leave our taxes down where they are, and can use it for increasing that. And we could direct that money to go into the road management plan, because does that fall within the parameters of the use of BC gas tax money?
I'm not entirely sure. I think it does, but I think it would also be worth clarifying with UBCM for that.
It is worth clarifying, but I went to a seminar some years ago maybe 2 years ago, where it was a much wider ambit for gas tax money. And it wasn't quite, you can spend it on anything you want, but it has to be for certain infrastructure, and I'm virtually sure that roads are on there, but I know Mr. Jones has his iPad and he'll have that answer in mere minutes. Councillor Braithwaite, please.
I'm happy to entertain a little bit more money into this if other people are. We could bump it up another $50,000, put $150,000 in it this year instead of just $100,000, or I'm happy to stay at 100.
Is there a consensus that we go to more? Now, first of all, I take it, Mr. Horan, whether it's 150 extra or 100 extra, you can still manage to spend it. Apply it to infrastructure renewal.
Yes, Chair. The weight, yes.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Ney, then Councillor Kirby.
I'm just wondering, I think we all want to try to get, a handle on this infrastructure issue. What I'm struggling with here is it's almost a bit arbitrary of what we're putting into the pot for this. And I would just like to, through you, Chair, ask staff, at what point, I've lost track of the numbers. We've seen it sometime long ago about how much money do we need to put into this pot so that we're not working against ourselves, so that we're not, what we put in, that we're not chasing, trying to get ourselves so that we're how to explain? I think you know what I mean, but how much money if we keep putting this amount of money in, we're still not catching ourselves up. That's the point. If we put 100 in, if we put 150 in, we're getting closer, but we're still not there. And it'll keep slipping on us every year. So until we do start getting to that number where we are caught up. So my question to staff, what is that number we need to get to? If I remember, it was like a couple million, wasn't it? Was it?
Through you, Chair, the study that we did in 2012 and then refreshed the data in 2013 is where we get the numbers from. and to maintain the condition of the roads in 2013 state, so they've gotten worse over year. The number quoted in the study was 2.8 million per year.
So that's where I go, okay, it's just a little bit arbitrary. We can put 100, we can put 150, we could put 3, 4, 5 into it, and we're still not even going to get near to what we would all like, where we would all like to be. So I'm okay with 100 or 150, but we're just not there.
Thank you. So right now we have 100 in there, and then a suggestion for 150. So we need to find a consensus on one or the other numbers, or a third number. So is there a consensus on the 100? Show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay, 100 people prefer 150. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can we discuss the 1% instead? Because I feel like that is where we should be allocating this money, because it's here we are saying another $100,000 to the paving management system when we, as a specific fund, why not put it into increase the 1% fund, make it larger, make that a greater portion of tax dollars as well, like add to that 1% fund, make it a larger investment so that we're catching up. I think that would be, you're all looking very confused. So I'm confused, obviously, that I know that last year we did it from gas tax funds. I don't know that we have to do that every year. Do we have to do that every year from gas tax funds? Or can it be from taxes and gas tax funds? Can't it be whatever we set that 1% or 2% or 3% rate at, just so long as it incorporates both gas tax funds and whatever else we need?
Yeah, I think the suggestion for the 1% is above and beyond gas tax money, right? Last year, we redirected the gas tax money into the infrastructure program. That amounted to, I think, about 600,000 that we went at, very approximately from last year. That's in their infrastructure renewal fund. If we then continue, which no one has suggested we not, putting gas tax money into that same fund, we would have round figures $1.5 million in the infrastructure reserve fund now. So at the end of this year, or at the end of the budget cycle. So have I got those numbers right, Ms. Carter?
Yes, you do.
Right. And we also know that from what we've heard from our reserve report, that certain reserves are used to even out spikes in taxes, which allows you to take some reserve money out and work with it, right? So those are our options. But I'm going to suggest that we tentatively agree on whether or not it's 100, whether it's 150. That's a tentative agreement. Then we'll go to the 1%, because they can be tied. You can say, I'll do 1%, but I don't want to do 150 extra, right? So.
Or you could say you'll do more than 1%.
Could do that too.
And not bother to allocate something so specific to paving. I mean, I think if there's asset management information from our staff, they should prioritize how it's spent. I don't feel comfortable deciding necessarily that it's paving before a certain project on Dunlevy or East Down, whatever. It feels arbitrary to decide suddenly that we just need it for paving and be so specific. I think that staff come to us with these capital projects and they come to us with a budget that is prioritizing the need for work. And I think we should be funding infrastructure on an as needed basis, not saying specifically you can only spend this on paving. It just feels like we're micromanaging.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Murdoch, please.
I hear what you're saying, Councillor Kirby, but there's a bit of method to my madness on this one. So there's multiple ways that we can spend money on infrastructure. Many of those require a fairly detailed plan and some larger projects and some matching grant funding. So water infrastructure, sewer, storm drain. Paving is the one area that we can actually allocate money and get some things actually done, because it's essentially just a contract, ramp it up, do a bit more work. It's also an area that, because we haven't been funding it appropriately for a number of years, the cost of repairing it keeps going up. So it's got a real multiplier effect by not doing it. The 1% essentially is doing the same thing as the paving, but saying we're going to put that into the fund so that all the other pieces are going to be funded. But it doesn't, that is just, we're so far behind on the paving. I think it's worthwhile, given that we didn't last year do this increase. This is just matching the increase that we should have done last year. And we actually, probably it should be 200,000, because we really should have done $100,000 last year and $100,000 this year to kind of work our way towards the 200,000 or the $2.4 million in 2013 that's required. We're just so far behind here that this has, to my mind, has the largest multiplier effect, and it's the one area that we can actually spend it this year in this year's budget. We can't spend the 1%. We can allocate it and let the staff know that they have the money to start working on some of the projects and keying those up over the next 1, 2, 5 years. And that's the logic of separating it a little bit, is that we can actually accomplish something this year and put money aside for the future years.
Okay. So there you have it. But I think your point is a good one, Councillor Kirby, because some people might say it's more important for sidewalks. I mean, we heard that from the kids as an example, right? Wider sidewalks, better sidewalks. But let's try to get consensus on it. I didn't see very many hands at 100. I want to see some, if there are hands at 150. Okay, who would support 150? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, 5. Okay, so let's tentatively put it there because it is connected to the 1%. Okay, so thank you. Okay, now, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say that certainly as a result of things like potholes and the state of the pavement, I think for a lot of users of the road, seeing this number increase from 100 to at least 150 is reasonable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Should we go to the 1% not currently in the budget? And before we do that, we have the number up there as to where we are? Update that number. Where is that now? I can't capture. Right there. Okay. All right. 4.84. Yes, go ahead, please.
That number includes the increase that the police chief talked about as well, the 1.6 or whatever it was?
Yes, it does.
That's everything we've done up to now, as I understand. Okay. Question is now, I want to come back. This has been suggested, discuss the 1.1% that's not currently in the budget. All right.
I think that's defendable. I think we have, if there's an issue, I think that's defendable. And I think, yeah, I would risk taking it to 6 just because that's where I think we need to be investing, and I think the community would understand where we're coming from when I think almost, it seems like increasingly the community has become aware, probably because of our pavement management neglect. They are aware of our infrastructure needs because potholes are very visible, and it's the most accessible thing for the public. So I think it's defensible.
Okay. So someone going to suggest it that we do this, and I think part of the discussion we have is, and I appreciate it's not new money if we take it out of the reserves, but we do have that reduced spikes approach to our reserves. So would this be considered a spike or just considered the new reality? Okay, who wishes to make the suggestion that we add the 1%?
I would say that we add the 1%. I agree with Councillor Kirby. I think this is the new reality that we're at. This is where we should have been for many, many years now, is around 5% taxes, rather than always trying to have it down at 3%. I think this is much more realistic, and I think that everybody that I have talked to within the community says, go ahead and raise our taxes, but make everything better within the community and support the infrastructure and fix the roads. So to me, this is very supportable.
Okay, I don't know, did you have? No, so Councillor Murdoch, then we'll go to Councillor Ney.
Well, just to try and mitigate, there's a certain amount of randomness, arbitrariness to these numbers. But I might just ask staff, engineering, public works staff here, if there is a number here that actually makes a bit more sense. The 1%, is there a number, just given the projects you might consider? I understand there's some lead time requirements for seeking funds and so forth that makes more sense. Like, are the projects all in the nature of, $500,000 or $1 million that you need actually more money available to seed those, or is there anything else here that makes sense purely from an operational efficiency perspective, or certainty over years perhaps that the funding is there to know that it's there for certain projects?
Through you, Chair, the 1% figure comes from all of the directors, staff, having looked at the various infrastructure challenges, both underground infrastructure, roads, and facilities. And what is required and what we've briefed in the asset management strategy, the various activities that need to happen, is one of those key things that needs to happen is to provide a product that allows council to make balanced decisions about all the various challenges and what the funding levels might be going forward, long-term plan, which we have not been able to do because it's a big effort to do, as we've discussed at this table before. So the best we could do as a staff was make a recommendation that we know that the funding levels need to be higher, and we know that it needs to be done in a gradual way. And we know this enough now that we can make a recommendation that says, at least this as a thing to debate and a thing as a potential way ahead.
Thank you. I fully support this. I think the numbers are just, we need to get on top of these costs, and this is a start. To get there, and I think the long-term planning portion of this is a pretty critical portion of it as well. We're not going to solve it by just putting money at it. It's got to be part of other grants and other pieces, but at least we seed some money in here for some of these future projects.
The other aspect of these projects, also loans, right? Remember we had that MFA, what did they call it? The intergenerational shift. And loans was part of that. That's something we also need to consider, because if we build up all of these reserves, that means that newcomers haven't really paid for the ongoing asset, which could last 50 years of their lifetime. Councillor Ney, did you have your hand up?
Well, yeah, I guess I don't have anything new to add, but I think it's clear to all of us that this isn't a problem of this council. This is a problem that's been decades in the making, and this may be the council that's going to take it seriously and decide we can't not address it anymore. It's just becoming the problem's just expanding before our very eyes here. So I agree with Councillor Braithwaite when you say I think the community understands this, and the community survey that was done by staff in 2016 shows that not only do they understand it, they're prepared to put money into it. They said that. And people I talk to on the street say that as well. So I do think this is the responsible thing to do. I think the community knows that this is what we need to do. And I do think probably this is the new number that we're going to be looking at if we do continue to take this seriously. And I really agree with you, Councillor Murdoch, because I'm just kind of in awe when I look at these numbers and what we're so at such a shortfall still. We're making the effort, and I agree with that. But at some point, I hope that we can, ask our staff about some ideas about what that long-term plan may look like, because this isn't going to get there.
Okay, so I think there's a consensus now on that issue. So Ms. Carter, then, the next direction you need, I think, comes back to that fourth issue. So the 1%, there's consensus. We've long-term debt, we've deferred till sometime in May. Pavement, we've got, so it's the surplus and how to apportion the surplus vis-a-vis the bike lane budget. Is that my understanding now, or the last item?
That is correct. I just want confirmation of the allocation for that. Is it the 115 to paving and the 115 to the bike lanes?
Okay, so that's in keeping with everything else.
And just confirmation that we are continuing to allocate the gas tax money into the infrastructure renewal reserve.
Yep. Okay. So the two confirmations, are we confirmed on the 115-115 split?
I completely disagree with that. I think we should be leaving as much as we possibly can in the bike lane reserve fund for the future project that was presented to us tonight.
Okay.
Because we aren't guaranteed of having a surplus next year. Okay. We aren't guaranteed of anything going forward. This is a gift I think we have before us that we can invest immediately into a project this summer that will bring benefit and to the community immediately.
Okay, so there's two parts. It's not going to affect the 230 project, right?
No.
Number one. Number two, the longer term. Let me ask Ms. Carter something. In the longer term, if we have another, let's call it the diorama project, where we want to implement what we saw here, or some version of it, okay? Can we take that money from general reserves? And can we take it from the infrastructure renewal?
Your Worship, it depends on what the project is and what the intent of the reserves are. So it needs to be revisited on a case-by-case basis, and we can't count on surplus funds every year.
Okay.
I'd just like to clarify then that if we do it that way, where we take the 115 out or we leave 115, I'm not really understanding got so many. Yes, the 230 is split in half, but how much is remaining in the bike lane fund after this year? After this project is complete?
After the project, okay.
Depends on how much the project is, right?
That's correct. There's existing, prior to the 230,000, there was approximately 150,000 in the reserve. If we add the 115, that would give us 265,000 in the reserve.
And if we spend 230 of it, we'll be left with $30,000 for any future project.
Plus any grants.
Well, we may or may not get the grant, but so say we get the grant. Either way, we are left with less than $100,000 for a future project that's requiring separated lanes and far more expenditure than what we're doing right now in front of the high school.
Okay. So there's not total consensus about the split of 115. There is substantial consensus. Do I have that around the table? All right, so that's good there. Now, and then the second confirmation was we continue with putting the gas tax into the renewal. That's the other one you wanted? I think we discussed around it, but there was nodding of the heads. I think there's consensus there. All right. And that amounts probably to about what would have been 3% of taxes, right? Okay. So, good. Now, how are we doing all here now? I think the next, where are all my sheets here? Then what we're going to do here is, next is public input and comment opportunity. Following that, I think a very high level, where do we go from here? Rudy, the next steps, which are fairly straightforward, which we'll get to in a minute. So, does anyone wish to come forward and address us? And I see the people here who know what the routine is in terms of the name, rank, the name, community, and writing it down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen and members of council. My few remarks here will not be nearly as much fun as the group that was here earlier. They were great.
No diorama, Ms.
No
Patterson?
diorama, no diorama.
Well, I can tell you we're only slightly disappointed about that.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments about surplus funds. There's been a lot of discussion around the table tonight, interesting discussion, but we don't have any information on 2017 because the year-end reports are not finished. But when I looked at the information on surplus funds from the audited statements, and more particularly the segmented department information for the years 2014, 2015, and 2016, the annual surplus for each of those years was $4.1 million, $3.5 million, and $3.2 million, for an average of about $3.6 million. And if I look at the surplus as a percentage of the total revenue, that was an average of about 9.2%, which is not too bad. But if I look at it as a percentage of the net revenue available for municipal purposes, the average went up to just over 16%. I felt that that was high. So I know that budgets need flexibility, and contingency, I think, is fine, as long as it's reasonable and supportable. But I don't think it should be used as a substitute for reserve funds. And 16.5%, or near that, is a substantial amount. So that, I look at issues around how the surplus is on the segmented portions of the budget versus reserve funds. And I guess there's a couple of issues, I think, of measuring performance, as how we do each year, is certainly an issue. And clarity on how the reserves link to the 5-year financial plan and link back to those surplus amounts on the segmented portions of the audited statements. Also, in acknowledging that our reserves report, it's getting better, but it still doesn't show transfers in and out of the reserve funds, and we don't really have any policies yet for thresholds in those reserve funds. So I think that, I think it's important to have, particularly if you're going to be raising taxes, it's very important to have greater transparency to garner community support for funding. And it would be really beneficial if we could get more detailed information before the budgets are totally finalized on the surplus amounts that are factored into this 2018 budget, and perhaps some indication on how, when, why the funds will be used. That's all I have to add to tonight's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Patterson, anyone else wish to address us? All right. Mr. Stinson. Yeah, you can, yeah.
Andrew Stinson, I'm only asking this so people won't ask why I didn't ask any questions on the budget. I was just curious about the 1% asset fund. This is more of a question of curiosity than a critique of it. It's just, is this going to act as a grant, so every year it's just going to be a 1%? The intention is for be a 1% increase on taxes, or is next year it's already going to be assumed there's going to be a $240,000 and there's going to be another 1% added on top of that? That was just I was looking for clarification into that.
Well, you're going to have to return to these chambers.
Oh, no.
Next time to see whether or not that's an ongoing thing. One of the things we had discussions about earlier was about council's ability to change, operating council's ability to change capital. Council's always got that ability, so who knows? It could be 0.5% next year, or 2%, or 0%.
Well, the reason, the question that I'm trying to raise is, for raising the money for the paving, the intention is that for that raise to be permanent. Is the intention of the raise in the grants for the 1% asset fund, is that always supposed to be a 1% raise, or is it going to be in 1% in addition to, I don't know if I'm making any sense where I'm coming from this question, but I'm just trying to see if it's intended to always be at around 1%, so next year it'll be 220-ish thousand, or is it intended to be an additional 200,000 to what was budgeted this year? So there'd be 200,000 on the budget for it in place next year, and there'd be an additional ask for another 1%. That was what I was asking. Is it going to be compounding?
Okay.
Through your worship, so next year when we bring the budget forward, there will continue to be a 1% for council to consider, not an additional 1%.
All right. Seeing nobody else, I've got a question from Mr. Jones. I just texted him, but I turned out I texted to the wrong. I texted to your office, the landline. A lot of good that did. So my text to you was, do we need a motion to receive the documents that are before us, some letters and things?
Your worship, I think you're fine. We've got the direction. What you will, you'll see coming forward, hopefully, we're going to try to get it to the next council meeting, will be kind of everything that you've done here today compiled into the financial plan and short staff report.
Which comes to my second question, which I also sent to the wrong number. And that is, so we don't need a motion to recommend council that these are the directions?
Your worship, I think it would be useful just to have a final motion saying that that the staff prepare a budget based on the decisions and discussions.
So the motion I would entertain is that the estimates committees, the financial plan and bylaws be prepared based on the estimates committee meetings of the last 3 days, and you can put in the dates. We all know the dates, and that the bylaw be brought forward to an appropriate council meeting for consideration.
So moved.
Is that good? Thank you. Moved, seconded. Now, discussion on that. I think we've had lots of discussion on that. We'll see the bylaws. So I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Now what we get to do is next steps, and I think we just covered them, right? That's the next steps. Now, I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Moved, seconded. Okay. About adjournment? Do you have a question about adjournment? A question about process? Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, and I won't take long. But I just, I'm wondering if there isn't, I mean, we're at the end of this and we have this number in front of us. You know, it's nice to sort of have the big number. We get asked a lot in a lot of budgets is, you know, what are some options in terms of what we can look at cutting or restricting, or, you know, this year we really need to, we have a big project underway in Public Works. Are we going to sort of tools down in some other department? Those sort of broader questions that would sort of allow us to look at, you know, the broader spectrum of projects that are going on, the sort of the net macro number after sort of, you know, guesstimates at what some of the projects are. And also to have a bit more sort of time to delve into some of the, like this, the issue of surpluses was raised here, and we've had multiple. You know, it's hard. You look at the financial statements, and the surpluses are consistently sort of 4, 5, 3 million, but those aren't real surpluses. They're kind of surpluses that go into reserves, and they're mandatory theses, and it's very hard to sort of get a real sense of what we can spend and what we can't spend, what the reserves are for, and kind of have that broader conversation. And I don't know how to get to that, but I'm throwing it out there because I think in future years, and I'm not putting this on you at all, Ms. Carter, because you're doing a remarkable job stepping into old systems and old processes that you're working within. But from my perspective, it's very difficult to, you know, make spreadsheets up to try and understand the flow of things and not be able to have a conversation as a group in public about what this all means and where we can kind of get to. Because I think, you know, people who aren't number people, I think this is kind of the core of what we want to do as a council is actually say, okay, it's not so much the percentage, but what are the sort of you know, the priorities, but until we have attached numbers to them, there's always this kind of fuzziness to it that we're not really sure if we're actually going to spend the money in. So I'm just throwing it out there. I think it would be nice to get to that in future years, because I think this leaves a little bit to be the desired in terms of having the bigger questions prior to getting to the end of the third day where we're all very, very tired.
Ms. Carter, are you able to give us an answer that's shorter than the question? Number one. And number two, are you able to extract a question from that and answer?
I'm sure it was even a question as much as it was okay.
Well, you started by saying it was going to be a question. So let's see if there is a question you can answer.
Through your worship, we're currently going through a process of determining what the differences exactly are between the financial statements that are presented and the $1 million in surpluses that you see versus what we actually budget. The best tool for you to get a sense at this time of what the surplus would be in the detailed operating budget that you have in your binders, there's a projected actual column. Because then you're comparing apples with apples. The financial statements, there are a number of different entries that are required by accounting rules that aren't reflected in the budget. So the budget document is your best tool.
Okay. Another question?
Related to a point of sort of clarification. In the motion that we just approved, I just wanted to make sure there was also an understanding that the fourth item that we deferred to have a report come back relating to long-term debt. Just want to make sure that that was part of it.
I don't really think it's not per se part of that, but the staff have directions to do that.
Yes, thank you.
And that's all that's necessary. Now, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, and that is to thank staff. Particularly staff that stayed late with us tonight. We'd let the police chief and the fire chief off easy, but not the engineering department. And I'm glad, of course, that you did stay and help us out, because there was obviously some very big issues that we needed to discuss. And I want to thank staff. I mean, one of the things that we've learned through this process and from earlier from MFA is that our finances are in pretty darn good shape. MFA said, you have high reserves, you have low debts. That's always a good way to be. And I think the budget that we've struck here tonight is a very good budget between spending now and then saving for the future. So, and that's always a difficult balance to make. I know we have to have balanced budgets, but the overall balance of the mix of what we're doing in this community, I think, is excellent. I think we see that from our citizen survey. So I want to thank our staff for all the work that they've done. It really has been a lot. And I know, 3 years ago, we had different people sitting here. And so for you to step in and do this great job is a real tribute to your skills and experience. And I want to thank you for that. And, of course, thanks, Mr. Jones. He's always keeping us on the straight and narrow procedurally and otherwise. So thanks, everybody. And thanks to the people who've shown up here diligently. And I'm going to call the question now. All in favor? Adjourning? Anybody against? Good. And a round of applause for our staff. That's what we want. Woo! Thank you. Now it's Miller time. I think they might have said in the old days.
That was very nice. Thank you.
Thanks. That was good the way you slipped in that other thing.